call the meeting to order. This is the, what is it? Wednesday, May 20th meeting. And please stand and join me for the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right, thank you. And I'm going to maybe angle this microphone towards me because I know I'm a soft-spoken person. So please let me know if I should speak up louder. So this is a sparse agenda today. We have just our interviews of candidates. So in our first interview is at 6:15. So we have this time where we can just touch base about the questions that we're going to ask. Mary Arcardi suggested that the way we did things last time worked. I don't know, Mike, do you want to fill us in anymore since you've been working with Mary along the way?
No, I think I really haven't had much interaction with it since we decided to go back out again. I would just remind everybody that, as the chair, I took these first, I guess the introduction, what would be numbers 1, 2, and 3, and then 4, 5. I don't know where 6 went, but 4, 5, 7, and 8. I think we just divided up amongst the 4 remainders. Each of us asked a question, and anybody was allowed to ask follow-ups, right? To try to stay within this time frame. And I know she had suggested last time, not to create any kind of a point system, but just, once we were done, we would just deliberate. And the chair, as a chair, I asked for a motion of, and it was pretty clear then that there was a favorite.
I guess I would also remind people that we should do our best to say positive things about the candidates that we like, as opposed to
stay positive.
If there are things that we don't like, we can keep that to ourselves, but focus on why we like specific candidates. So, yeah, I'm sorry, Mike, did I know you said something about questions 5 through 8. Does anyone have any questions that they would particularly like to ask? I guess we'll put it that way. That was the thought, that I would do question 3 and that we'll just go down the row. Where is that? Oh, wait, there's no 6.
Right. That's what I was saying, Cheryl.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's okay, because I was trying to figure out how we would divide up.
Right.
5 questions between 4 of us, but we don't have to.
Okay.
That works for me. I prefer not to do number 5. That's the one question I said I would never ask that question.
Well, I think we can change the wording. I mean, I think these are suggested questions. Yeah. I think as long as we are consistent across
6
what we ask. So you have a suggested change of wording? I guess, Jason, how about you? If this one,
I'll munge it when we get to it, I guess. Brendan just pointed out in the personal skills is actually 6. It just
good point. Okay. That makes sense. Yes, it's just not, doesn't have its own box.
I'm okay with communication.
That's good catch.
Okay.
So you think we just scratch management leadership from the questions?
Oh.
I mean, just put communication interpersonal. I mean, we can scratch interpersonal since the language isn't clear, and integrate
I think
that portion of the communication.
I think interpersonal actually would lie under management and leadership.
On the next line, 7.
I think. I mean, it's
Yep.
Yeah, I think you kind of merge it all into one.
Yeah.
So management and leadership with interpersonal skills.
Yeah. That would be my suggestion.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
That works for me. Right. So who is taking what?
Do you want to just go in order like we did last time?
Sure. I mean, so should I start with residents, or will you start with residents, Brenda?
I think if you start with residents, then everything works out.
Okay. Get budgeting and finance. Get education. Jason, you get management and leadership with some interpersonal skills thrown in. And Mike, economic development. Okay. Right.
So quick question. Will you be allowing any questions if people are here in attendance?
Yeah, I don't think we did before.
Sometimes it's uncomfortable if someone asks that. and then
Right, okay.
Good for the board to kind of
To
decide.
decide that, okay,
Maybe say that up front.
okay, sure.
You don't have to, you know, we don't have a public comment section. You don't have to, they're just here to observe.
See, there's such a big crowd, they might not find
Well,
out.
But if you have people, but if you have people on here that raise their hand or anything else,
Yeah.
you know, you just, my suggestion is that we just keep it to this group and ask them questions.
I'm not, if we're talking about different wording, I'm not in love with the wording on, the second point,
Sure, which,
specifically about such as why you were fired and, or why you leave so soon. I think, you know, it's maybe not applicable, but.
right, so
you should say,
maybe
like,
right, the
and-
background of leaving positions,
Yeah, exactly.
sure. Maybe a little too pointed.
Yeah.
You have a different opinion, Mike?
I would say the pointedness might be specific to any resumes you have,
Mhm.
Yeah,
but as a general question, I agree it's too pointed, but if the resume speaks to it, I think it's a big question to ask.
yeah. I think during one of the last interviews, it was,
Somebody got caught.
someone got flustered.
Yeah,
And it didn't, yeah, so.
The other thing I think we did last time that I don't see on here is we did encourage them to ask questions about Mendon and about us at the end. So I think as there's time, do we think before or after the closing statement?
Right.
More,
I mean, you could even make it a conversation. If they've got questions within the context of these questions we're asking them, they can ask.
true, that's true, okay.
Would you ask, I'm not sure what their availability is. In other words, does someone have to give 60-day notice, 30-day notice, 2-week notice? I just wondering if we can kind of fold that into one of the questions that's already there.
Sure, do you have?
I mean, I think it's relevant and not
Right.
that it's gonna make a difference, but at least gives you an understanding
Right,
of how quickly you need to proceed to contract negotiations from whoever the candidate is.
yes. Do you see a good place where that would
No,
fit in?
Don't you think it'd be a better idea to pick somebody? And then once we get into the negotiations, talk about it rather than ask, when can you start? I think I mean, it's just my suggestion is to leave that alone for once we make a decision. Because some of that could change. They may not know, you
Right,
know, depending on who they're,
yeah, the question
that's
is
just my thought.
if someone has a contractual obligation that.
Right.
that, you know, I saw in one community, the person had to give 45 days notice.
wow,
I think just drop it into the follow-up section. If there are no follow-up questions, we got a little room,
okay, so
you know, just.
possibly,
I think we actually, in the first round, I think we might have asked that question of the candidates. Until it came up, so.
I know we asked it for the interim candidate, certainly.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
we start last week.
Wow, is what I said.
Yeah.
Just realized the hum is from the fans.
I was just noticing,
That's
as we
how
all
it's running
start
the leaf
talking,
over
the hum
inside.
is, it's quite noticeable when we're all quiet.
And when someone points it out.
Yes.
It's back
Well,
again.
but I was actually just noticing it before that.
Certainly gives it a nice atmosphere.
I guess. Right, so one other point tonight is so after following the interviews, so we may have some gaps of time between the interviews, so I think we'll just have this quiet time between the interviews and stay on the posted time schedule. And then following, we don't have I'm sure you've all noticed, we don't have an executive session this time, so we'll be doing our deliberating, but we possibly will have we likely will have an executive
We-
session next week.
Yep.
Next Wednesday at the end of our posted meeting to discuss specifics of the offer. One other point is Mary Arcardi suggested that we include town council in the contract negotiation this time. And so I did check with Karis and she has some availability next week for the executive session as well as potentially before.
Should we schedule an executive session sooner than next Wednesday if we're actually gonna talk about what the offer? Like to if we decide on candidate tonight, do we wait a week? To talk about.
Well, I think what we did was we knew what the advertised range is, right? When we advertised, so what happened was, I started back and forth with the plan that we were gonna hone in on. We never got that far. But I think you're right, Mike, we need to have it scheduled.
So, I mean,
I think we did have it scheduled last time for that specific discussion.
Right.
Was to come up with a number that night of what the
Right.
range was.
Right.
And I did speak with Karis, she wasn't, in real time talking, but I was talking. with her. It's not on the,
But we still got background checks.
right, so I think, yeah, my understanding is that we will select a candidate, make a conditional offer without the specific dollar amount.
well, the issue was, we started that way. He
Right.
wouldn't sign for the background check
Right.
until he knew what was within his range,
Ah,
which would force it.
right,
And then he met with the police chief. And then that night, he withdrew.
I see. So I think the soonest that we could have an executive session would be Monday. So if we would want to do it earlier.
Well, do we need to do that, or do we just
I
leave it
think-
to you?
So I think there will be the opportunity to start the discussion before the executive session. So so Kara suggested that she could start to feel out the
great.
specifics. So, and that, she said typically they will ask for the contract from the previous TA as well as, the, and the posted salary from the job listing, like Karis will use that as the starting point to work with them. So that was her suggestion.
Yeah, I think realistically, that discussion will take until next Wednesday, right?
Right. So I think I'm hoping that we will coalesce around a candidate. But I think someone had also suggested possibly we should consider if there is a sort of like a second choice candidate. I don't know if we want to do something like a ranking. Thought.
My suggestion is that we pick one, like you said, coalesce
Yes.
candidate and proceed to March, and if for some reason that doesn't,
Right.
then we can
consider, I think,
certainly can, reconvene and
right.
and pick if there's a second. I mean, if you remember last time, there was one and there was no desire to pick a
Right.
second, right?
So,
Maybe
but
that'd be
we can
different.
consider this time whether there might be an additional. So I guess one other thing that Karis mentioned was whether we would want to ask a question, basically getting at if offered the job, will you take it? But Um, so that is something to consider for a follow-up question, but do,
If they're here, aren't they?
that would be the idea. So that's the hope. So I think we'll be going with that assumption.
You never know.
You never know. We are here with the assumption that we want to hire one of these candidates.
Yeah.
But we don't know who. So it looks like it is 6:15 now.
Go get the first scan.
Wonderful. Thank you. Realizing I probably have been speaking too quietly. Move the microphone closer.
You want to see your words or?
Oh,
Looks like
see if my
transcript.
words are actually transcribing, if I'm
Sure they
speaking
are.
loud enough. Could ask the people online. Can you hear Elena?
Yes, loud and clear.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Okay.
Thanks, John.
I know that I'm sometimes told that I'm soft spoken. I can project. I just have to remember to do so. What's that?
Similarly afflicted.
Evening.
Good evening.
Here.
Welcome. Yes, please do. And there's a microphone. Just make sure that you're somewhere in the vicinity
All
of
right.
it. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you very much. Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank-
So welcome. So I'm Elena Brugos. I'm the newly elected select board chair. This is actually, should we introduce ourselves? Brendan, can you?
Sure. Brendan Shell, newly elected vice chair.
Mike Goddard, not elected to anything.
Well, you've been elected to the board.
I'm Jason Cooter.
Mike Morale, the previous chair. Good to
And
meet you all.
And you have met Greg.
I have.
So we're going to jump right into questions rather than ask you to give an introduction.
Okay.
And we expect that you'll cover your background throughout our questions. We'll also be asking you to give a 2-minute closing.
All
And I
right.
also would like to make the point that you are welcome to ask us questions along the way if you have questions that come up, and we may also give you an opportunity to ask us more questions at the end as we have time. So I'm going to dive right in. So our first question is about background. So as you can imagine, many of us and our residents have done a Google search on your name. Just so you know, these questions, we're asking the same questions of all of our candidates.
All right.
We've seen public interviews you did and read newspaper articles. So please discuss your perspective on what we have seen, and in particular, the background of leaving positions.
All right. I guess I'll do it chronologically. My first position, well, before that, I was in the practice of law. I got involved in local government in Ludlow. I still live there, and I'm right now the elected town moderator. So I've remained active there. But when the town administrator position was created, some members of the board suggested that I apply for it, and I did. And I served there for around 5 years, a little less than that. I left because of the pay scale there, which was probably the biggest mistake I ever made in my life. It was considerably below some of the surrounding communities, and uh, I put out a feeler, and another town was interested, and then I withdrew it, and they came back and said reconsider, and I did, and I shouldn't have. So that's why I left Ludlow.
but I still love the town. It's the town of my birth and probably where I will spend the rest of my life. Um, I did not stay in that second town very long, but I went on to serve in Uxbridge. I'm sure you're very familiar with Uxbridge, and they tend to have some issues with retention. They certainly did then. And at that time, the big controversy was the construction of the new high school. I don't know if you remember that. The board of that hired me was anti-high school. Uh, Within a year and a half or so, the board flipped to be pro high school. Honestly, I'm an administrator. Uh, I'm a professional. I'm going to build what you want me to build or not build what you want me to build. So it really didn't matter to me, but I was perceived as being anti-high school, and I also was very cognizant of the finances, and I was, telling the committee that they really need to be careful with some of the things they were doing, particularly with the uh, non-building parts, the site work. They were, I think, overly optimistic, and they didn't like that I was telling them things that they didn't want to hear. So I wasn't renewed because of that. I went on then. I served in Athol. And I, honestly, are any of you familiar with Athol? Nice little town, beautiful area, really poor. One of the poorest towns in Massachusetts. And I really enjoyed working there because I think I did some good up there. But they do have a residency requirement. I think I was fulfilling that residency requirement. I was renting a house in town and spending most of the week there. Um, my family home was about 25, 30 miles away. So, I was there most of the weekend and I went home for dinner sometime, and they were not happy with that. They wanted me to move my family up there. I mean, and it was to the point of one of the selectmen confronted me that my water bill was not high enough. Um, so it came to a point where I discussed it with my family, and my wife would have had to leave her job, and she had a good one. She worked for ISM in England that they run the power grid. It was not a commutable distance, at least for her, from Holyoke. So I ended up moving on from there. I went to Sterling and I served there, and I left on my own free will for personal circumstances. And I was pretty much out of this game for about 7 years. I left because my grandmother was extremely ill. She has passed since. She was in her mid to late 90s then, and she was in a nursing home in the Cape, and I was out there a couple of times a week, and it just was incompatible with being a town administrator, particularly in Sterling. Sterling tends to uh, demand a lot. There are a lot of meetings in the evenings, and they expect the town administrator to be at most or all of them. I would be there pretty much Monday through Thursday into the evenings, and they have 3 meeting rooms on the second floor, and usually 3 meetings in them. And I would be in one, and there'd be a knock on the door. Conservation wants to see you. And I'd be in there for 15 minutes, and there'd be a knock on the door. Can you come over to finance? They have some questions for you. So that was every night. And it just wasn't working. I was burning the candle in both ends. So I applied in Enfield, and it paid about the same, and it was a 9 to 5 job. It was boring, but it worked for my lifestyle back then. Um, and it was a significant job. It was 9 to 5, but it was not a lot of interaction with the public. I was the assistant director of public works. Enfield has a huge public works department. Our operating budget was about $25 million. So comparable to your entire town budget. But public works there did everything. They maintain all the vehicles in town, a fleet of 160 plated vehicles. They took care of the roads. In fact, the roads were one of the smallest divisions. There was a buildings and grounds division that took care of 27 buildings, including schools, um, parks. We had a custodial division with over 60 custodians that cleaned every building, including the schools. So it was busy. I probably would have retired there, except um, the town had a very large budget hole. They essentially spent all of their ARPA money on operating expenses, which is a huge mistake. You do not take one-time money and spend it for ongoing expenses. So I left there. And frankly, I took the first place I could to land, and that was Blandford, and that was a mistake. I was there for only a short time, and I met with the board and said this. I said, you know, this isn't working, and I know this isn't working. It was primarily a secretarial position. I was the only full-time employee outside of Public Works, and they only had a few. And most of the time, I was alone in town hall. So it wasn't really a managerial position, and there was no real power attached to it. And I didn't want to do it anymore. And that's why I'm here. That brings me to here.
Thank you. Let's see. So I'm going to ask the next question, and then we're going to proceed and ask questions one by one. So the first topic is about residents. So how will you engage with residents to understand their needs, and what strategies would you implement to maintain and improve the quality of life while preserving the town's unique character?
All right, I think you've got two questions there. One is engagement with the public, and honestly, I think there's a special issue here, having been in Uxbridge, in that the press doesn't seem to want to focus on you too much. Some of the techniques I used in places like Athol are harder. Athol had a daily paper, and I was on the front page every day because there wasn't a lot of news outside of government. Here, I would take advantage of some of the new technological developments. Reverse 911 is a good way to just blast everyone and let them know what's going on. And certainly using the internet. Not everybody likes to use the internet, but a blog or something like that, just to let people know what's going on, is very useful. And just like engagement. I mean, public meetings whenever you can do them, public appearances. And finally, I found the best way to really engage people is one-on-one. I've always had an open door policy. I've never turned anyone away from my office that wanted to speak with me, even when I was probably too busy, say in budget time. So I would always make a half hour or so to speak with anyone that needed to speak with me. But you've just got to put yourself out there and be accessible. Work through every channel you can find. It's certainly we're in an information age. You've got to take advantage of the new technology.
So in any of your past jobs, do you have examples of how you use the new technology to drive communication and engagement with?
Yeah, certainly I've used reverse 911 to let people know what's going on, and that's one technique you don't want to overuse, but certainly it's a good technique to get something out that's important, certainly for emergency services, but not beyond that. The parade is this weekend or something like that, just so people know what's going on. Also, I don't know if you've got a public bulletin board or anything like that. We put any sort of public bulletin board. We put one up in Sterling, and
Like a physical bulletin board?
yeah,
Or,
it was hooked to my office. It was a crawl on there, and I would, whenever I had new information, I'd update it so people driving by could read. It was immediate. It's every technique that the private sector uses to advertise is fair game for the public sector, and certainly signs are a good use of people pay attention to them.
So, thank you. So one other part, I know you mentioned it was a two-part question. So another
yes,
part
I'm
of the
sorry.
question was about What strategies would you implement to maintain and improve the quality of life while preserving the town's unique character?
That is a question I would need to spend more time in the town to answer, because I've worked in a variety of towns, and every town has a different tolerance for development and different a different sense of self. Um, when I was in Athol, it was a very poor town, and all they wanted is anything they could get to uh, any kind of development that they could have. Now, what we did there to really make the quality of life better is we brought in some retail. The historic downtown was had lost a lot of what it had been there. I worked to get some uh, optician, a dentist, and some of the services downtown that had been lost, and worked with planning to get people in. And we did that downtown. But as for, major retail, there wasn't much. So on Route 2, we created a business improvement area. I worked with Market Basket. They wanted to be there because it was a central area uh, for that part of the state. And even though there's a lot of small towns around, uh, Athol was a central hub for about 50,000 people. And the problem is, where they wanted to be, there was no water. And it was going to be $3 million to bring a water line in. And we went to the state, and normally Athol is pretty successful with getting grants, but we weren't. There just wasn't anything out there then. So we created the Business Improvement District and bonded out and used the marginal revenues from taxes to pay off those bonds. And it only took about 8 years to pay off the bonds. And now there's some development out there. Now, I don't know if you know Sterling at all. It's a nice little town, but um, fairly wealthy. They had an economic development committee, but it was clear they really didn't want a lot of economic development. They liked it the way it was. Um, I think some towns those are polar opposites, and I would have to determine what you want here. I know I've looked at the numbers. You're highly dependent on personal property taxes, residential property taxes. The percentage that is business, industrial, and personal property is only about 10%. So, most of your money is coming from um, people's home taxes. Plus, you don't have a lot of state aid, I've noticed. So, yeah, it would be nice to have some businesses that uh, would contribute property taxes without putting children in the schools and that sort of a thing. But it really depends on what sort of tolerance you have for that. Um, Mendon has some pretty significant developments on 16, but beyond that, I don't think you want a big box store outside of that area. It doesn't seem like the sort of town where that would be welcome. So I would really have to have some listening sessions with the community and determine what you would want for development.
Thank you. But on that note, why don't we move to our next question?
Right. Good evening. My question is about budgeting and finance. So, what unique challenges does Mendon have, and how would you approach addressing them? And I'm speaking about budget challenges. And the second part of that question is how will you engage with and collaborate with the school district, because they comprise a large part of the budget.
Um, Budgeting is probably one of my real strengths, and certainly I've looked at your budget very carefully, and I did see some things that are really that are positives, but every positive has a negative, and every negative has a positive. You aren't getting a lot of state aid. You're highly developed, as I was saying, you're highly dependent on personal property taxes. But by the same token, you're only getting what, a little over 500,000 on a 20. Well, I don't know what this year's is. I saw the 23 budget, 21 million plus budget. So some towns live and die on state aid. You're not one of them, but you are budgeting very carefully. I noticed you were sailing very close to your levy limit, at least in the year I looked at. And that is dangerous to me, because when revenues for whatever reason don't come in as expected, you've got to make adjustments in the budget. So, that's something I'd be looking at very carefully, and really worrying about. I mean, your property tax is generally going to come in what it's supposed to come in. It's, I noticed you didn't have a lot of people defaulting on that, and most people don't default on their property taxes. That's one of the first things they pay. But simply, people may stop buying new cars. New growth may not be what you expected it to be. So sailing that close to the limit is a danger to me, and I would be a little reluctant to go as close as you've been doing in budgeting. Other challenges, I don't know, your growth was tepid. What was it, about 100,000 last one year I looked? And with the level of inflation, that's not giving you a lot to work with. 2.5 gives you a statutory number that is not linked to inflation. And inflation has been well above 2.5 the last few years. So that's something that really has to be looked at. And budgeting is a process. I don't know what your budget process is. I can talk about mine, but I am very much a proponent of looking at every single line, going through with the department heads, and budgeting based on usage in the past few years. Some department heads will just turn in last year's budget with an extra 2% and everything. That's not the way I budget. They're going to have to defend that. I will be going through every budget line and coming up based on what you've had in previous years, projecting forward. And if you haven't spent the budget out, you're not going to get it this year. If you've overspent the budget, we're going to talk about why you've under budgeted in the past years. But a realistic budget, typically when you find and go through every budget line and look at what's actually spent, you find, at least I've found, that when you budget that tightly, you're not going up as much, and you may go down. I have to say, as far as budgeting, Enfield taught me a lot, because the council there loved spending money, but they didn't love spending money on public works, because nobody really cared about public works. Nobody wanted to buy a new piece of equipment or worry about the sewer plant. They wanted things that, a new program, or a new this or a new that, something shiny that they can say to the voters, we did this for you. So we tended to be, I was there for 7 years, and our operating budget the year I left was lower, not adjusted for inflation, lower in actual dollars than the year I started. So I learned to budget very, very tightly. I don't know if did I answer the question?
You did. Second part of the question is, we're in a regional school district.
Oh, working with the school?
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's a matter of really reaching out and creating relationships with the regional school. I've been in communities with regional schools, and I've always worked very well with the superintendent, and even better with the school business manager. I'm very aware of the challenges of the schools, and I myself am licensed as a school business manager, so I know what happens in them. But it's really a matter of creating a partnership and managing expectations. You have a fairly small regional school district, more akin to, maybe more equal with Upton. But I had in Athol, I had a 2-town regional school district. It was Athol and Royalston. Royalston is a smaller community, but still was only 2 towns. Other areas I've been, has been, I was one of 4 or 5 or 6 towns. But either way, I attend every meeting I'm invited to with the superintendent, and you've got to build a relationship and manage expectations. So I want to know what his challenges are, but I'm going to tell him what my challenges are too. And also my concerns. I found a lot of regional schools are not really doing anything about OPEB, and that is a ticking time bomb. And it's not something that should be ignored, but I'm finding that at the regional school level, a lot of them are. I don't know what's going on with yours. I looked at some things for the schools. I looked at your cherry sheets, but not much beyond that. So that's all I can say. I've always tried to forge relationships with the schools. I'm very understanding of the challenges they face, particularly with special ed, particularly with transportation, particularly with out of district placement. It's not an easy thing to budget, but they need to understand that we have the challenges too. Thank you.
So, just curious to understand, it's going to be around communication, your preferences, your style, primary audiences in this role, who, and
Well, I think you've got in communication, you've got a number of constituencies. You're one of them, and you need to. You are the primary interface between the government and the town, so you need to get all of the information you need to pass it on. And I like to over educate well, I don't like that word, but over inform the Board of Selectmen until you tell me, no, you tell me stuff we don't need to know. So I will give you lots of reports. I will give you lots of information. I will be in communication with the chair several times a day. I don't like to email spam everyone, because then you start talking to each other and we have open meeting violations, but I certainly will let you know in real time any issues that come up. But then I will report at the next meeting so you know what's going on in the town. Now, as far as the departments, I'm very much someone who wants to create a team. I think town halls too often are just like a mall. Here's this department's like this shop, this department's like this shop. It should be more like a department store where everybody's working together. Everybody has the same set of goals. And sometimes you help each other, either with resources or sometimes with personnel, subject to whatever union complaints are. That's not always possible between departments, but and the way you foster that is by fairly frequent all department meetings. I like to have them once a month or so, where everybody sits down. And it depends how you want to do it. Sometimes with lunch, sometimes in the morning with coffee, and just talks about the issues that each department is having, and bounces it off the other department heads, just so everybody knows what the issues are in town hall. I think that builds camaraderie, and also makes people understand that they're not in a vacuum, that this is a team they're on, and we all have the same goals. It's not to collect taxes or make sure that the vital records are correct. It's to make sure that there's efficient town government and the people are served well. And the third constituency is the people themselves. You want to have a public service attitude within town hall. That you want to set the example that you're going to go above and beyond to make anyone who comes in the building happy, and the general public happy with the government they have. And some people have more demands than others. I would say 70% of the people in town, what they want from government is to keep the streets clean and provide decent schools for their kids and just don't bother them beyond that. Um, but some people really want to know what's going on, and I'm going to provide that information for them. It's, that's the level of engagement you want. Um, and I found it, sadly, it's getting harder and harder to find people that are engaged. One of my roles in Ludlow as town moderator is to appoint the finance committee. And not too long ago, I would have multiple applications for every opening. Now it's kind of, if I get an application and the person looks reasonable, they're getting appointed because I have trouble filling vacancies. People just don't want to, their lives are busy in other ways. They don't want to get involved.
You'd mentioned, basically as much information you not over communicate, the wrong word, but you provide a lot of information. What are 2 or 3 things, whether it be a report or some other piece of information, we would expect to get from you on a regular basis?
First, you're going to get financial reports, but you're also going to get some analysis. I like to do pretty frequent analysis with the budget. And I think that's very important that you track the budget throughout the year. You're not going to be in a situation where you're 3 months from the end of the year and say, by the way, these accounts are already overspent. I track things in every couple of weeks based on the percentage, and you can't do it with every account because some accounts are, seasonal. Um, you know, if your snow account is expended right now, I don't think that's a problem for you because there's not going to be any more snow. But you're going to be concerned about if your electricity accounts are expended. We're coming into the cooling season, so you want to track things, particularly salary, and make sure that if you're at 22% of the year has gone by, you're under 22% for the expenditures in those line items. And if they're not, you should be asking questions as to why, and I will provide that information. Anytime something happens in town, I want to know about it from the departments. If there's a significant event for fire or police, I expect the chiefs to tell me about that, and I expect to give you a report because it would be very embarrassing for me and for you if you're contacted by a news outlet to ask about something and your answer is, what happened? Uh, that's a failure on my part, and it looks like a failure on your part. So I want to get that information out to you as quickly as possible. And just generally any information that's relevant in the town, I want to get to you as soon as I know it. Now, many cases, I'm the last to know because you live in the community and you're highly involved in the community. And I'm not going to be out on the ball fields on the weekend because my daughter's 27 and was never particularly athletic, but a lot of people are, and I appreciate it when you bring that to me, and there's feedback just so, Mike, this happened. I heard this. If someone contacts you, you may get this information, and I will follow up on that, and then I'll distribute it. But no, what I'm saying is, I guess it's all about communication, and it's a two-way street. And I want to, be communicative to all of you. Thank you.
I'm gonna slide into interpersonal skills, communication adjacent. So I think follow up on how your personality will play in your work with the staff of the town. So you had mentioned, you would hope that you would be told when big events happen. We've just had a gap time where we've had multiple people in this position. So tell us how your personality comes into play when you try to gain trust here with staff, and how that leads into your leadership and management style.
I ultimately, I'm not an expert in a lot of these things. I haven't worked as a collector. I haven't worked as a fire chief, but I have done a lot of things that a lot of those departments have not done, and may not have any training or actual experience in. Personnel, for example. I have an MBA. I've had lots of management training, so I try and be a resource when there are issues. I can, think of times when people come to me, and I've got the legal knowledge, I've got the personnel knowledge, and I'm a resource, and that's what I want to be. I want to be a resource for the departments. I don't want to be the guy who's sitting in the office and they're like, don't tell them about this, or I'll yell at you. I don't yell. I like a collaborative relationship, and I want people to trust me, and when they have issues to come to me, and I will try and help you. For example, at one point I had a police chief who was very competent in some ways, many ways, a great administrator, great at getting grants, great at dealing with the myriad of paperwork that police departments require, well respected by his peers, but not a great leader and not a great personnel manager. So when issues came up, he came to me, and I became very involved in that at a retail level, which I would not necessarily been involved at in the fire department, because the fire chief was very good at dealing with people. And as a result, at that particular town, I had a little more power. It was a manager position. And I ended up restructuring the department and adding an XO position who could actually deal with that, and was better being the guy in the morning, handing out assignments. That's what I try and do. I try and provide expert power in areas where people need expert power, in management, in personnel, in budgeting. Not everybody knows how to budget. You may be a good assessor, but you may not know how to do your departmental budget very well, and I'm the guy who's going to sit down and help you with it.
Just one follow-up to that is, how does that lead to your philosophy on performance management and evaluation? So are you saying that you're also going to adapt your performance management, like how you review your staff based on their skills and priorities, or you have some overarching theme that you like to use for evaluation?
As I said, I like to be collaborative, and performance. There may be issues with people's performance initially. I'm going to not be terribly concerned when I come in if they have some deficiencies. I'm going to work with them. If they are resistant and refuse to change, that's going to reflect poorly in their performance review. At an extreme level, at one point, I had a town clerk who was honestly the worst thing a town clerk could be. He was terribly disorganized, and I tried to work with him. He was resistant. Eventually, I said, "Well, we're going to have a performance plan," and I set a meeting, and I prepared a performance plan, and he showed up at it with a lawyer. And I said, this isn't gonna work. And I ended up not renewing his appointment. I mean, that's the worst that can happen, but it did happen at one point. Performance, performance can be improved. I think performance reviews are a way of improving employees. I'm not looking to discipline, at least initially. If there are issues, I want to bring you up to where you should be. That's the goal. It's not to get rid of you. It's not to punish you. It's to get you performing the way you need to.
Thank you.
I'd like to talk about economic development. Clearly you did look closely at our budget and talk about the, percentage of about 90% of our revenue. Interior to the town is based on real estate taxes.
Yes.
And we do have a desire to have more economic development. We do have an economic development committee. I guess I would challenge you or ask you, what strategies you use to develop that other revenue, whether it's, earmarks or, based on your experience, how would you develop a plan? Where would you get that extra revenue from?
Well, I think you need to look at what your assets are in the town. What are your major corridors, and is there areas that can be developed? And then when you have some targeted areas, is there a place you can put a technology park, or is there space for retail? And once you have those are assets, places where you can reasonably put something and review, make sure you've got the infrastructure in there. Then you start imagining what can be there and start chopping it. That's important. You got to let people imagine that something can be there. Some examples I've had for that is the old Ludlow Mills in Ludlow. In my first job, it had sat vacant since the 40s when I was there. And so, well, we can't do this forever. It's just the buildings are just deteriorating. Beautiful old mill buildings. I contacted the developer, the owner. It was not the original company. They had bought it, but they were sitting on it and said, what are you guys going to do about this? And asked to meet them. And they thought about it, and they ended up not doing anything themselves. They sold it, and now it's being developed by West Mass Development. And there's housing for the elderly there. There's Health South, which is a rehab hospital. There's a brewery there. But things happen. But somebody's got to point to it and say, think about this place. Imagine. Or nobody really is going to do anything with it. The same was true with that parcel in Athol where the market basket is. Our economic development looked at places where we could actually have something and have some vision, and then you shop that vision around till you find someone who is willing to enact it. Obviously, the town can't do that. That's not what towns do. But there are people out there that want to make money, and you can sell the vision to them and what they can do with this property. Because there's lots of other people doing that. I didn't see, you don't have a dedicated economic development coordinator, do you, that I know of?
Not a coordinator. We have a committee.
You have a committee, but committees are committees. That's not what they do full time.
I don't know if you're familiar with CMRPC, Central Region. Yeah.
Yep.
We have a collaborative effort through CMRPC, and have had some pretty successful interactions with the Chamber of Commerce. And we've met with people from the state, and I guess that's where I would go with, what relationship do you have? Or do you have anything with, state or federal resources to try to pull that money? Because we've tried some of that.
Getting federal and state resources. I've looked at your finances, and it's more difficult here. you are not a poor town, frankly. You were above the state average with income, and that makes it hard to get those grants in. I got lots of grants in Athol, but it's just not, I mean, your average tax bill is around $8,000. When I was in Athol, and it's not that long ago, the average tax bill was $2,300. That doesn't go very far. So, you know, we relied on grants, and we got them because the demographics supported them. But, you know, it doesn't mean you can't get them in other places. Particularly if you've got a helpful, rep and senator. I don't know your current rep. I know Ryan, because he's been around for quite a while. I've known him since he first ran as a rep here. Okay. But no, that's economic development. You know, I'll just have to evaluate what you've got here, and you've got to be a little bit visionary with what can be there. It's not static. You've got to look at what can be, and, you know, imagine that, and deal with the people that could actually make that happen.
So I guess now we do have a little bit of time yet. So if there are any follow-up questions that the board members would like to ask. If there are any questions of us that you would like to ask.
There's, what have you looked for in the past in a town administrator? And how do you see the difference between an administrator and a manager? I've done both, and I'd like to know exactly what you are looking for in in an administrator here. Because I've been in, you know, various places, and not every board has the same vision of what the administrator is going to do for them.
Can I answer that?
Please
Yes.
do. Yes.
My expectation is we need a leader. We need a collaborative leader. And we've had good leaders in the past. We specifically need somebody that can, you know, foster relationships between departments and have a kind of a team approach. I think it's important to be collaborative.
Mhm.
And that's what we'll be looking for, is somebody, not so much as an administrator who's just supporting and, you know, shuffling papers, but somebody who's a leader. When you talk about economic development and going out into the community, finding, you know, those stakeholders that might want to invest. That's a good example of what I think we're looking for in a town administrator. Somebody to lead, to have a vision, to help us shape, you know, what we want to, where we want to go. So in other words, we have ideas. Right now, we're looking at, we have a master plan that was just completed. We had a division of local services review. And, you know, they've made some suggestions we want to implement. And our new town administrator, we're looking to move that forward and develop those plans in the master plan in the DLS study and implement.
I think it's very important. Having a master plan is important if you use the master plan. I've noticed so many towns go through the trouble and the expense of creating a master plan and put it on a little check next to the fact we have a master plan, and then never look at it again.
Well, that's the beginning, not the end. And now we
Yeah.
do have it, and our plan is to implement it. So that's specifically what we'd be looking for in a new town administrator, is to use, and not do it by themselves, but to foster this team. I know that Greg and his predecessor, Dave Dimash, who have been our interns for the last year, have done a great job, I think, of pulling the staff together and creating some camaraderie and you know, for the team. We're looking to continue to foster that.
Well, I think I've mentioned, you know, gone into the way I view the job, that I think it is a team leader. Uh, I've always viewed it as that, and not simply someone who comes in and gives orders. And honestly, there are some, you know, town administrators that view it that way. I've met some that are particularly former military that are just view it as a chain of command. And that's not the way I like to operate. I think you can see I'm a fairly softly spoken person. It's, I like to build teams. I think that's the way a small town anyway works. I don't know if it works in a big city where you've got a mayor in place, but I think it's, you've got to build consensus within a town. And it doesn't help to have a town hall that's just a bunch of disparate offices that don't work together well. There's not enough resources to not share them.
Feedback.
Anyone else want to add anything?
I just following what Mike was saying, you know, between master plan, I'd say we are entering time of action versus planning. So we've got our information, now we want to execute. A lot of it will probably be significant change. So from your past experience, how have you driven or dealt with, you know, change management within a municipality? Because change is always hard. What are some of the challenges that you've faced and overcome?
It is hard, and a lot of that, the change is dealing with resources, with having constrained resources. When I started, it was a when I started in local government, it was just about that time. It was about 20 years ago, when the effects of 2.5 were starting to cumulatively uh, kick in, where there was now, you know, uh, most departments had ample budgets, sometimes overly ample budgets, but over time, that 2.5 constraint had whittled that away. And when I first got in, there was a lot of concerns about, you know, I need more than this. I need more than this, and they had always gotten what they had asked for. And 2.5 really changed that over time. It didn't do it immediately, but that was just about the point where inflation had kicked in and brought that percentage down. So belt tightening was necessary. And I think that change had to be managed and is still being managed. That you have to get the away from the abundance mindset to the efficiency mindset. And that was, I think, the biggest change that local government had to make, that you can't have everything anymore. And so many times the department will say, well, I need this. Do you really need it, or do you want it? Sometimes you really do need it, but, you know, as an administrator, I'm going to work hard to get the things I know you need. You know, if the fire department comes in and said, you know, our breathing apparatus is just not compliant anymore, and we need new breathing apparatus, that's a need. But there are certain things that are not needs. You know, they're wants. We really need new carpet. Well, if we can't afford it, we're not going to get it this year. That's not a need. Um, so that's just a mindset that's changed. I think that is the biggest paradigm shift from over the course of my my tenure in government. That you've got to really get away from the, you know, we're going to get everything we want, because you're not going to get everything you want anymore.
So I think,
One,
Um,
one quick question.
yeah.
Did want to ask. I noticed that you're in the process of building a new senior center. Or are you? I
We-
saw.
That is a good question. So the question passed at town meeting but failed at the ballot. So we are in the
Okay.
process of
Regrouping.
regrouping. So we cannot answer that question at this time.
I just wanted to mention, I've been through this process. I still am in part of this process in Ludlow. We built a new senior center and it took a long time. I've been on the committee for now 7 years. We opened it a couple of years ago, but we still, well, I'm actually meeting tomorrow because, we are still waiting for the generator and that will be the last thing we do. But, I think I can provide some advice on that. We did not fail. We passed a town meeting, but we also thought very carefully about, I don't like the term selling, educating the voters as to the benefits of it. And we also thought about what was possible and what was uh, what would be accepted. And I think you had a $13 million project. Um, how big is it?
It was about, yeah, 12 to 13,000 square feet.
Um,
Construction costs have gone up a lot.
I'm sure they
Yeah.
have. But when this was about 5 years ago, got to the stage where we were going to go to the voters and ask for it. The committee discussed what will they tolerate, and I advocated staying under $10 million. We actually asked for 9.8. We got it, and we built it about 5 years ago. We asked for 9.8. Of course, Ludlow's a bigger town. Um, but the senior center director wanted a 24,000 square foot building. And said, no, we can't afford it. And we said, what can we build for less than 10 million? At the time, we built an 18,000 square foot building and we built it. We asked for 9.8, it cost 9.6. We're going to be turning some money back. And I understand you can't build that anymore, but I think you also need to and in this case, educate the voters that it's going to be more next year and it's going to be even more the year after that. If it's necessary, or at least highly desired, the sooner you build it, the less it's going to cost.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So we're
I-
close to out of time, but I would like, so we have about 2 minutes left. So if you could just give us a 2-minute closing statement and tell us why you are the best fit for Mendon.
I think I've got a lot of experience as a town administrator and a town manager. I've been practically anything that's going to happen here, I've probably seen before in one or another variation and probably several variations. I think I bring a lot of experience. I bring a lot of knowledge. I am an attorney, and I'm very knowledgeable on Massachusetts local government law. I'm experienced in procurement. I've been certified more than once. I currently need to recertify because but I'm very up on the procurement laws. I'm very up on finance. I think I can bring a lot to you and bring a lot of knowledge. Um, on a personal basis, I kind of always have liked Mendon. I was in Uxbridge and I kind of looked, and Uxbridge can be contentious. They've been through a number of managers there. Um, and I always thought this was a very nice town. And I had a lot of back and forth with Mendon and I liked the way the place was run. I think if the job had been open back in the day, like going on 15 years ago, I probably would have applied back then. So now it's my opportunity and that's why I'm here.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great night.
Great evening.
The steps on the way out.
It's the squeaky steps. Yeah.
Early warning system.
Well, I don't have good knees. That's one thing I can't offer to you.
I'll put a
We're a little tight, but yes, right on schedule. I think sometimes we have a little breathing room. So is our next candidate going to come up or are
Yes,
you?
we'll go down again.
Okay, all right.
Okay, do so.
Yes, please. Thank you. Don't rush up too quickly because we're waiting for Brendan. Hello, welcome.
Singing sound is coming on like telephone. They don't have an identity, so it dings so that you like pay attention. You can turn that on. Somebody.
So welcome. And I guess, so I'm Elena Brugos. I'm recently elected Chair of the Select Board. And we're going to jump right into questions rather than asking you to do an introduction.
Sure.
So I realized it would actually be helpful for you to say your name so that we all know.
Sure. Ralph Vataco.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for
Thank you.
joining us. So we have a number of questions that we are asking all of the candidates. And so we will be sort of asking them one by one. I have a couple to start with. And also just I will invite you to ask questions if you know, feel free to ask us questions as you are answering your questions.
Okay, thank you.
We will possibly also have some time at the end for some follow-up questions and where you can ask us additional questions. So I will start right in. Yes, in any case, right, as I said, rather than you giving an introduction, we're going to ask you questions and we expect that your background will come out throughout our questions. But we will ask you to give a 2-minute closing at the end.
Okay.
So our first question has to do with background. So as you can imagine, many of us and our residents have done a Google search on your name. We have seen public interviews you did, as well as read newspaper articles. Could you please discuss your perspective on what we've seen, and in particular, the background of leaving positions?
Sure. Thank you for that question. I'm sure as you looked at my Google, it's pretty easy to look up Ralph Vataco. There was only two of us, and one of them was my dad. So so a lot of it, a lot of what you see as Ralph Vataco in Google is me. Um, I'm pretty proud of my Google profile. A lot of it, I think, and I hope it shows that I've had quite a long professional career. I've had some success in banking and also as the director of planning and economic development for the town of Sandwich. As in many cases, as public officials. Some people troll you. There was, there's incident, unfortunately, someone didn't like a decision that was handed down and, wound up calling me corrupt and whatnot. But I was very proud that there's a letter somebody wrote to the local paper in my defense. So I think that speaks to the character and my commitment to the town and to do a good job and work hard for the people that I serve. Um, you know, uh, there's I I'm a little hesitant to bring this up. It's a little dramatic, but many years ago, I was a New York City police officer, and as you go in there, I was involved in a gun battle, and that still sort of pops up on Google. So that's the reason why I left the NYPD. So that's about, that's my Google profile in a nutshell.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, so and then I am also asking the first other, we've got a number of topics of questions, and so has to do with residents. So how will you engage with residents to understand their needs, and what strategies would you implement to maintain and improve the quality of life while preserving the town's unique character? Sorry, a lot of parts packed
Yeah,
into
no,
that
no,
question.
yeah. There's a lot of parts with that to unpack, and I've always been involved with the life of residents. Starting from my days as a police officer on patrol, sort of understanding, what the needs of the community were, and I mean, I follow that all the way up to when I was at the Cooperative Bank of Cape Cod in banking, understanding the needs of the customers. And how did I do that? Well, I went out and I was involved. I was involved with the Chamber of Commerce, listening to the business community and figuring out how I could help. When I went over to become Director of Planning and Economic Development, I maintained my role with the Chamber of Commerce. Unfortunately, there was a little bit of a disconnect between the town and the business community in Sandwich. And I wanted to, since I was a member of the business community prior to becoming a municipal employee, I wanted to bridge that gap and continue it going. I also have, um, you know, uh, before I worked for the town, I was a selectman, and as you're always engaging with the community. I can't walk 5 feet down a grocery store without anybody asking me a question. So it's what I do is we take what people say and listen. And I think one of the examples I could use for that in my role as director of planning and economic development. We had an accessory dwelling unit bylaw just was not working, right? And we had to figure out why it wasn't working. People want to rent rooms in their house. They want to age in place. So we went kind of on a, for lack of a better term, a listening tour. It was just the bylaw was just too complicated. So we pared it down. We made more by right, and we really streamlined the special permit process. And I'm pretty proud to say our ADU bylaw that we established in Sandwich is kind of the model for the one on Cape Cod. Additionally, uh, for workforce housing, our affordable unit to market rate unit was not um, developer friendly. It was just the ratio was off. So again, we listened to what the business community had to say. We put forward a bylaw just very recently that we changed the ratio more market rate to affordable housing. But what happens is you just create more of a diverse inventory, housing inventory. There's a little confusion at town meeting. It's an affordable housing. It's a bylaw. So the town moderator won by 2/3. It's supposed to be half. Actually, we're presenting it to the Attorney General's office. It didn't pass by 2/3. It missed by one vote. But we think of because of the new housing, which it's just a majority to change those bylaws, we think that it will be accomplished.
Oh, so hello, my name is Brendan Chanel. I am the recently elected vice chair. So my question pertains to budgeting and finance. So what unique budget challenges does Mendon have and how would you approach addressing them? And then the follow-on question to that is we're in a regional school district that comprises a large part of our budget. So how will you engage with, collaborate with the school district?
Yeah, as I looked at the, at the budget, it's a pretty tight budget. You don't have a lot of, the free cash is low, and in addition to the free cash, it's the reserves. So as I look through the DLS, the recommendations, try to get that reserve up to 10%. And I think it's a matter of doing some long-term planning and capital planning. Things again that were pointed out in the DLS form. It's like, if you know what's coming, you could budget for it and you could budget properly for it. A few other things, you have some objectives going forward. One of them is um, the water project. Uh, there's something called the Water Investment Infrastructure Fund. It works sort of like a CPA. If that's something the town was interested in doing, we had done it in Sandwich. I had worked with the Sandwich Economic Development Corporation to help move that forward. In addition, I know you have some capital projects that are on the way, but there's something called a capital, not a debt exclusion, a capital exclusion. So capital exclusion is pretty neat. And I know these things because when I was a selectman in the town of Sandwich, our budget was pretty tight. We were very fortunate in that we have a power plant. We thought it was going to close down. We thought, how do we, how do we make up for that shortfall? Instead of closing down, they put in another generator, which, sort of gave us a boom. But I was in the selectman in the boom times. I was a selectman in the tough times. So we were looking at the capital exclusion, and what that is, it's a 1 year hit. If you have like a project, I hate to toss, oh, just $1 million, but like $1 million project or thereabouts, the capital exclusion can be presented by the selectmen. It's a 2/3 vote by the selectmen and just a simple majority at town meeting. And with that, and it's just 1 year, no interest rate, and it's just spread out in the tax bill for that 1 year. So it really works well for small projects, especially if we start looking at the capital plan, creating a capital plan. What small projects can be done? How do we fund that? So that's a funding mechanism. Yeah. Um, I have a pretty good relationship with our current school district. One of the big projects I worked on when I was starting as a selectman and then followed through as the director of planning and economic development. Um, like a lot of um, towns and cities throughout Massachusetts, the town of Sandwich had a declining student population. And as a result, we had to sort of mothball a school. So we went through the process, in working on, what the projections are for the student population and what to do with the school. So we decided to decommission the school. And in the process of decommissioning the school, we created new zoning. um, in the interim, the decommissioned school was used for the administrative staff. But outside of that, I was put in charge of finding a new buyer for the school. So what happens, we worked with this corporation when we're creating senior affordable housing. So it's going to be 128 units. And it's kind of funny, you know, it's amazing how long projects take in the municipal world. They take a very long time. And I could just say when I started just doing the zoning in 2017, we are going to close on the project either. I'm going to say tomorrow. It's not going to be tomorrow. It's going to be Friday or Monday. So, people, come come to my office like, what's going on? What's going on with the wing school? Is it happening? So I would have to talk people through that. But I try to maintain and I do maintain good relationships with the school and just with the other departments I work with in the town of Sandwich.
Thank you.
Idea of what your preferred communication style, mediums are, your
Yeah.
in this role, who do you see your target audience as being, et cetera?
Right. I rather do face to face. It's just to me, it's how I grew up. It comes across. I think it comes across better. But I know when COVID started, um, they sort of put me in charge of what medium to use, and we had to do the study on Zoom, and somehow as as happens, I became the Zoom czar for the town of Sandwich. So I'm comfortable in that format. I think it's who would be the target audience. And I would have to go and sort of go to reach out to community groups. you know um the, Obviously, right, the biggest group is the school district. Following the school district, reach out to Tri-County Chamber of Commerce, Imperial Auto, uh, Southwick Zoo, all those things, they all contribute to the town of Mendon. And I want to reach out to all those people to see what their needs are and to see how does it fit in to what we can do for them. Yeah.
What would your expectations be of communication and the process between town administrator and the select board?
Yeah, I think I would hope that it's an open communication. It works best when, as a select board member, if you have questions, you're hearing something from the community, you would reach out to, if I was the town administrator, what's going on, how do we help, how do we solve an issue. Um, we have a policy in the town of Sandwich, I think is a very good one, that if there's an issue, the selectmen, please don't go to the department heads, go to the town administrator. And it just, having one point of contact just makes life a lot easier. I know I've had open communication as the director of planning. Again, if I could just go back to the wing school, people call me up all the time. Members of the community asking me what's going on. In addition to that project, we have several solar fields going on. So they ask, they want to know what's going on. A lot of times again, projects take a while. Solar field gets approved. Then all of a sudden they see trees coming down. Why are the trees coming down? And so I have to, explain that to people who call up. So I've always had an open communication style. I like to give people information. There's no sense in, if I know it and I could share it with them, I do it.
So following on communication, you touched on it just a tad there at the end, your interpersonal skills and how your personality is part of your, how that reacts with your job and how you work with the staff.
Yeah.
And then also, how do your interpersonal skills and your personality there affect how you see management and leadership? You touched on it a little throughout the conversation here, but your philosophy and approach, performance management and evaluation would be the follow-up to that.
Right. I really believe in collaborative leadership. I never want to be the smartest person in the room, only because then I won't learn anything, and you start making decisions in a silo. I want to have and I have had collaborative a collaborative process. And and I learned this a very long time ago. And I had a boss, and like I was a young guy, and he was like up there in the organization, and he called me into his office, and he goes, he had this idea, and he goes, Ralph, yes, no, you don't have to say yes. And that was so empowering for me to look at, to look at his idea, and he trusted me that I knew enough to really analyze it and give him a truthful answer. And that's my expectation with people who work for me. I've had the good fortune of, again, working at the bank. I started off as a CSR rep. I became an assistant vice president, and I had three people who had worked for me. I identified their talents. I pushed them along, and they became three of them became branch managers. Um, and and the same thing I'm doing at the town of Sandwich. Prior, prior to me going to the town of Sandwich, the planning office, we had 5 planners in 10 years. So no one knew what the planners did. No one interacted with the planners. And if you know anything about it, you have to interact with planning, interacts with building, with the board of health, with natural resources, and and I saw that as an opportunity for me to reach out to those departments. And we have a very good working relationship with all those departments, where in the past the planners just sort of kept kept their head down, and looked at mass general law. You can't operate in a silo. I've never operated in silo. And I mean, you miss information when you do that. And so I've encouraged my staff to reach out. Whenever opportunities come up, like my assistant planner became the town planner. An opportunity came up for her to participate in the MMA, a leadership program, and I encouraged her to to take that, and she did very well. So I am happy to work with my staff, and people work with me just to get, you know, just to hear what their ideas are, because, it makes for a better decision-making process.
Can you just give a little bit more detail on the evaluate, like the pure management portion of?
Sure, absolutely. What in terms of evaluation, I like to give critique throughout the year. When someone comes before you for the annual evaluation, it should not be the first time, if you have an issue with them, that they hear it. You know, um, you know, I've had to, currently I have 3 direct reports. When I was in the bank, I had 6 direct reports. So if there was, if there was an issue, we would work on it, and we would improve it. And again, as I had pointed out earlier, if they're doing well, I want to help them succeed. If they're having an issue, I got them extra training, and help them to get to the point where they could be successful at their job.
Let's talk about economic development. Mentioned, in the beginning about looking over our budget.
Yep.
And it's tight, and we need some capital planning, which we've worked on. But obviously, we need to think outside the box to generate.
Yeah.
So we talk about economic development. And certainly, it seems like you're already doing that in Sandwich, but
Yeah.
would your approach be to help us spur economic development?
Yeah, I tell you, Michael, the thing you have to look at is, what does the town, how much economic development can the town tolerate? So I think that's the first question to ask. Does it want, does it want a distribution center, or does it want something less? Right. So I get the sense when I looked at Mendon, right? They like the rural feel. So I would look at at business programs which match the rural feel of the town of Mendon. You know, one thing, one thing we could look at is um, um, one like solar. You know, can you know what's the solar bylaw? Is that something the town has an appetite? Another big thing associated with solar is battery storage. Is that something the town has an appetite? Do we have bylaws associated with that? You know, a third thing is the, Mendon is nicely located between three major urban centers, right? Worcester, Providence, and Boston. You know, like how do we, how do we maximize that? Does it, do we have, we will look at the infrastructure in it for to do like for, hang on, this sounds like old computers, but for the web, can we, is there industry that we can have associated with it? You know, people would, I don't want to travel to Boston or Worcester or Providence. I could stay here and have it, and have it in Mendon. I mean, do we have the opportunity to create sort of those short-term spaces, for businesses, for our businesses to go and act. So I would look at that again. Look at what was hammered out in the master plan and see, see what what fits in Mendon. Another thing to look at is, it's rural. How are we with agritourism? I mean, is that something that can be associated with the town of Mendon? And also, like, how do we maximize Southwick Zoo? uh, uh, I'm sure there are opportunities there, and we could take advantage of.
Just as the follow-up.
Yeah, right.
In general term, now that we've finished the planning, we need to execute. You have any thoughts on steps to how to start that execution process now that we have the plan?
Yeah, you know what I have to say, when I looked at those plans, they're very good. The DLS plan is very good, and I like the goals associated in the master plan. I think the action items, I think it's too granular, the action items in the master plan. But you know, I have to say, these happened in 2023, right? And shortly thereafter, your town administrator left, and in the interim, you've had two interim town administrators, right? And and I tell you, despite that, this town has been moving forward on some of the big items that are in there. I mean, you still got the water project going, right? I mean, the senior center, I know it didn't pass, but that's a big effort. And really, without a town administrator to help full time push it along. And I tell you, when I look at the town, I was really impressed at the character and the heart of the town to keep that going. And you really need someone who's going to stick with the town as a full-time town administrator, to stick with the town for a while to get those things done. You know, the once you have a town administrator, which I hope is me, who will work with the staff. Yeah. Yeah. To work with the staff and develop that long range plan, and that, right, and the capital plan. And it's funny, once you start writing things down, they start to happen, because you have to look at that every day, and you got to say, how do I make it happen? And you know it's kind of funny, you've been in this position for a while, and to make things happen at the municipal level, you need three things, right? You need time, you need will, and you need money. And I jokingly say, and I seriously say, money is the least of it. And you say, why? If you have the will, to do something, then it happens. Because if you have the will, you'll put up with the time and you find a way to find the money. And you have to, and you have to write it down and you have to believe in it and make sure everybody knows that this is the direction the town of Mendon is going. And eventually you get there. And, for years, the town of Sandwich had something. We need a new police station, a new fire station, right? And I was involved with that. I was heavily involved with that as a selectman. And, the first time it didn't go through. The second time we pared it down and it went through, but that was on the list for a long time. And, we found $17 million. It was a tight vote. I think it won by 11 or 12 votes because I had to go. They did the recount and I was there. Actually, it was 11 votes. Then I found one more vote in favor of it. So it wound up being like 12 votes. But, but, something you got to respect that people understand, it's a lot of money. These projects that we're asked to do. Uh, but something, if you create the will, it will happen.
Thanks to that.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna, technical note, ask everybody, not you, Ralph, you're doing a good job, to talk directly into their microphone, and I'm gonna like point all the mics at you. Because I just got some complaints from the crowd.
Do you know what's funny? I get the same thing because the cable access calls talk in the mic, and it's like, oh my
So if you can hear
gosh.
yourself echo in the back, then
Yeah.
you're probably talking loud enough.
Yeah.
Elena, you've been doing great.
I have it pointed right at me. So-
Yeah.
All right, so. Sorry.
Okay, okay. No, thank you. It's important because, yeah, this is being recorded also, so people will be wanting to watch this
Absolutely.
later. So, great. So, I guess we do have time for more follow-up questions. I guess if there are any more, I know some of our questions had multiple parts, so if we want to revisit any parts, I know, yeah, so does anyone have any additional follow-up questions?
You mentioned that we had two part-time interim town administrators. Both of them have been very effective.
Right.
And one of the strong points, I think, is they're both collaborative and really fostered a team relationship amongst the different departments. I'd like to ask about your thoughts on that and how you
Yeah.
continue that and develop that further.
Oh yeah, absolutely. As I stated earlier, I believe in collaborative leadership, and and that's the only way you could get things done. Well, that's the most effective way to get things done. And as I think about to begin the job, what would I do? What would be one of the first things I do? And start creating. What is like creating a financial team would be the town administrator, the finance director, and the assessor. So, right, you have to have that team. So that sort of to understanding what the budget is, what future growth is, how do we anticipate and make that happen. The second thing is so then you have to have another team. So who are the biggest spenders, right? And I don't mean that in a bad way in the town. So it's usually right. DPW, fire, police. So you make sure you have a good relationship with them, and then of course, half the budget goes to the regional school district. So, make sure I reach out to them and just have consistent meetings, knowing what's going on with those groups. And then, what we do in the town of Sandwich, and it's kind of funny. I thought every town does it, and I see it in the DLS report. But I know it started and it's keeping going with the uh, with the um, with the interim town administrators that you have is really have a monthly meeting, kind of with all the available department heads. Make it fun. We call it ours the brown bag lunch. So we sit around in a circle and we just sort of everybody brings their lunch, and we sort of let everybody know what's going on. So you kind of, so what big projects are going on, and and I found that very helpful because we just completed We call it the local comprehensive plan. That's Cape Cod's version of the master plan. And really, we did it very organically. We didn't hire, I hired a consultant at the very, very end to sort of stitch it all together. But we had a steering committee, but everything we did, we ran through the department heads because the action items in our local comprehensive plan, the people who are going to execute that are the people sitting around the table. So we want to make sure that they're realistic and doable. So the process took us like 2 years, and it was very helpful. And I kind of um, learned that I was on the original LCP back in 2009 when I was on the planning board member, but we have the hazard mitigation plan, and I kind of modeled our LCP against about the hazard mitigation plan because every year in the hazard mitigation plan, I have to reach out to the department heads who put in the goals, and where are you? Did you accomplish it? If you didn't accomplish it, why not? What do you need? So we didn't have that in the previous LCP. We have that now in our current LCP, and I like that model. And something, when you put out objectives and you put out action items, you have to understand that. All right. Sometimes you don't achieve them. Why? Is it unrealistic? Do you need more time? Do you need more resources? So it's something that you have to have, to maintain that conversation.
Thanks.
Sure.
I had a quick question about managing budget. So I see in your past history that you were responsible for managing a very large budget in
Yeah.
a corporate setting or a private setting. How do you think those skills transit to municipal experience, and what's the differences in
Yeah,
similarities?
yeah. So yeah, the budget I handled for Parade Magazine was $75 million, and it was for the purchase of newsprint, and and the interesting thing about that is you just don't buy $75 million worth of paper, right? There's certain sizes, and you have to match them with the issues. So a lot of it is understanding the methodology behind the budget. So I've been very fortunate. The same way I like to promote people who work for me, I've been very fortunate in the town of Sandwich. My town manager has been allowing me to get other skill sets, and one of the skill sets, I asked if I could go forward and go to the MMA, get a certificate, municipal finance certificate from the MMA. So I had a good understanding of budgeting as in my role as a selectman, but I received a more in-depth knowledge. A lot more moving parts in the municipal world than with paper, but it's definitely understanding what they are, how it ties in. How does right? As you know, these are not terminologies that are not unfamiliar to you, right? How does free cash fit in? How does OPEB fit in? How does your debt ratio fit in? And I tell you, that was like one of the arguments. It's always a good argument, and it's a hard argument to get across to people. When you were, I saw when you were uh, looking to do the senior center, right? The argument, and it's a good argument, as debt retires, you want to keep a level debt ratio. So I mean, it's it's something that it's important, and how do you figure it into the budgeting, and it's good. And that's really where the town administrator and the finance director come in and explaining, and to the townspeople. And it's also like your role, like, how do you explain it? Do you support it? And people probably come up to you all the time, how should I vote? I used to love that question, how should I vote on the senior center, right? And then I didn't take it lightly, and I assume none of you take it lightly. And you sort of like, you think, oh my God, what am I telling? What do I tell this person? I really have to believe in the project. So to tell them to vote for it. And that's what it comes down to.
Thank you.
May I ask
Yeah,
a
please
question?
do,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. So speaking of projects and long-term projects, if we, role play, I'm the town administrator and I'm coming to you. And, okay, what is the big project that you want to see happen in the next 5 to 10 years? Do you have that? Do you have that in your minds right now? That, starting today, what is that long range plan that we're going to start today and write it down on the paper and work for it?
Well, we've been working on developing water and hopefully sewer
Right,
in the commercial spaces, and we really have two corridors. One up here along Route 16.
Right,
The other
yeah.
one, Cape Road or Route 140.
Right.
That goes along the south, the water from Bill into Bellingham.
Mhm.
And, we've been, that water project you saw really was
Yeah.
long-term water and sewer. Hopedale, to our east has, capacity for sewer, but they have
Oh.
water issues, and we have a small water district that buys water from them.
Right,
We're hoping to leverage all of that and work with them to develop that. I think the other, maybe not quite as long range, is if you look at a DLS study
right.
that we asked for, there was some action items in there
Yeah.
around public works and,
Right.
and maybe changing the way that we do things, which is why I asked the question about execution
Right.
of the master plan.
Yeah.
So really, I think the longest range thing is really economic development and providing the backbone of that, which really, in the past, it's been a lack of water and sewer. We
Right.
don't have an issue with water supply for the residents.
Yeah.
I mean, the residential areas, artesian wells and private wells work fine.
Right.
And nobody has an appetite to change that.
Right,
But economically, commercially, we're painfully aware that we need to develop uh, more financial resources, and it can't keep coming from the residents
right.
that pay the residential property tax.
You can't, right, you can't have a restaurant on an artesian well. I know that. So that's good to know because, again, a long range planning, how do you make that happen? I mean, does it, do we start looking at, as I brought up, the WIF, the Water Infrastructure Investment Fund, again, works like the CPA. Do we look at, a DIF, district increment financing? Um, so what happens, with that is, um, it's, you borrow on anticipated growth, and it creates the infrastructure to, to bring business in. It's kind of complicated, but I know, Mass Works, they have technical assistance to help communities create that. So, there's a whole process. It's identified. You go to town meeting and that. So there are tools that you can use to make that happen. Again, on the DLS report, I think it's great. It's a great blueprint for someone coming in and to know what the initial steps are. Yes,
think
Mike.
See the DLS study, see the master plan.
Yeah.
I think what we're seeing now is there's a lot of things that have bubbling to the surface. I think that our challenge, and we started this past year,
Yeah.
is actually starting to figure out how do we get after these different things, whether it be the DLS study, which
Yeah.
with the highway study. So now we're saying we need to look at the organization as a whole.
Right.
What does that look like? How do we get after that?
Yeah.
Recreational fields, senior center hasn't gone away. So the school will have some things coming at us.
Right.
There's a lot of strategic things that the
Yeah.
master plan, some of these studies point out.
Yeah.
Our challenge now and our next step is to how do you start to make sense of them,
Yeah.
prioritize them, and get the ball rolling so that we understand how they fit
Yeah.
a long-term plan.
Yeah, and it's hard. It's hard in your role as selectman because you're volunteers and you have full-time jobs and I know you're dedicated to the town, but you really need someone to as the full-time town administrator to come in and do it and present those plans and present a road road layout to get that to make that happen. And in my past history, I've done things like that from all the way back. I was an analyst after patrol. I was an analyst in the New York City Police Department, and we worked on crime control strategies. If you think something's overwhelming, try to reduce crime in New York City, right? So we worked on those strategies, and that was in the mid '90s, and crime came down. So what strategies in one of the stressful things that happened to me when I was working in Parade magazine was there was not a paper strike, but a railroad strike, and we could not get paper to the printing press. And fortunately, I had developed relationships. I knew people at the printing facilities. I promised to get them paper if they could, if they could bring paper to the press and make it happen. So, but after that, I developed an inventory system that would, to calculate what size paper we needed, what time of year, what was the issue size at certain times of year, and then we would stock up. So we would have, so we wouldn't be caught in the position where we had too much paper, but and not enough paper. We right sized it, and just going forward, um, the other things that we were looking at, the town of Sandwich had several surplus properties. So how do we dispose of those properties, right? So again, I would, I told my boss I'm willing to take it on. I got my MCPPO. So, and what I did, I'm sorry. It's the Mass Certified Procurement Officer. Yeah. I'm sorry, there's so many acronyms, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah. We had a couple of structures. Obviously, I've been talking about the wing school a lot. How do we get rid of it? Well, how do we dispose of it and respectfully? So I kind of used the skill sets that I learned in the bank. Marketed. I marketed it, went out, and we sold the wing school for $1.35 million. We had an older building which the town inherited it in 1976. And old buildings are very, very expensive. We had a restriction on it, historic restriction on the outside and the inside. So it would have cost the town 800 grand to fix it. So again, used some different skill sets. There's this website called Circle Old Houses. I put it on Circle Old Houses. We got like 80 inquiries, and we wound up selling it, for $100,000. But if you ever saw the HGTV show Houses with History, they're the people who bought it. So they bought it, they fixed it up, they the investment on it, and again, it's really a nice jewel in the town of Sandwich. And just one more, we had a fire station which went for 675. So again, marketing, working with the auctioneer, getting the zoning, and fielding the phone calls, telling people what they can use the building for. So we really, we thought that was going to go for 400,000, wind up going for 675. So that's just sort of thinking outside the box, using the skill sets that I have learned throughout my professional career and just applying them.
Have any additional follow-up questions?
Yeah, my one other question would be, so if you could describe the I mean, the culture here, in the town of Mendon, as you see it, that would be helpful. I know, you've had two, again, you've had two good interim town administrators. You're really moving ahead on projects. I suspect it's a positive culture, but if I could just hear it from you, that would be helpful.
Hilltop community, it was largely, farmers. And 2 years ago, we actually had at a town meeting, there was a question that somebody put on the town meeting about banning roosters.
Oh, the old rooster band.
We had somebody at the town meeting in a
Yeah.
rooster.
Yeah,
But that was humorous. But
Yeah.
It really talks about the people who come here.
yeah,
They're interested in preserving the rural nature of it, but at the same time, there's a lot of progressive people who would very much like to have some relief on their taxes.
right.
So we're looking for growth without losing the rural nature of the town.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. That's what, a lot of communities are looking for. That I tell you, um, similar to Sandwich, look for growth.
It's very similar.
Yeah.
I have family.
Yeah. Yeah. Look for growth and maintain that historic, right? That historic character. And like the things we've done, just what I was, touching on before, you know, and again, obviously, I'm sorry, but the wing school is top of mind just because it's a $52 million project that I'm very, very proud of that we're moving ahead. Um, while I was going through it, I mean, you talk about pride. People, they have postcards for the school. Who has a postcard of the school? I went through the old town archives and we found it. And I said, man, I said, whoever we sell this to, because I did the RFP, they better respect that building because that was a point of pride. And just like here, like amended, we could have development and we could maintain the character of the town of Mendon. We just have to figure out what 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 do the people accept and what do they want? And you just have to go through that process. Like I said, the master plan took like 10 years, which is which is good. It gives you a good idea of if there's a consistent message over those years, then that's what the town wants.
I
Right.
think,
Yeah.
this senior project.
Yeah.
For the senior community center, we tried to
Yeah.
get past this first round.
Yeah.
The previous senior center was built by volunteers.
Yeah.
That built it. And everybody is very concerned about the senior citizen population and realize that we really owe this to them.
Yeah.
The concern is people just are not, they don't understand how we're gonna pay for it.
Right. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right.
That's a big question. Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely.
Want to add anything about? I guess another point is a lot of people do move here for the schools, so but I think there is a lot of pride in the community. I think people love this town. So, and I think that's where some of the resistance about change comes in. They don't, right. They want certain changes, but yeah, change is hard.
Yeah.
Um, so, yeah.
So we find out, and what I always like to say, change is going to happen whether you like it or not, right? So it's better that you control the change than have change control you. And I think that again, looking at the character and the heart of this town, especially over the past year-ish, that I was like looking at it. It's I think you're ready to control your change and to go in the direction. And again, you just, and this is, my presentation to you is that you're going to need a town administrator who's going to stay with this town and sort of see that change and work that change and control it and put it in a direction where the town wants to go. And, you want someone who's going to stay in the position, not just sort of churn and burn, you know, um, I tell you, when I looked at it and I looked at the character of the town, I keep on saying the character and the heart of the town, it's someplace I want to work. When I look at, the size of the town and the size of the administrative staff, as the town administrator, in especially in this town, that's it. You're the guy. You're the decision maker. And I've been working towards that. I've been in those positions in my professional career, and I'm prepared to do it. Prepared to put in the time to be there, to go to the school district meetings, to participate in the chamber. I mean, I participate in a lot of meetings. I'm involved in a lot of things in the town of Sandwich because I'm willing to take it on. When I first started the position, all we did was zoning and planning. But be- but because I was willing to take it on and I have a very good staff, we've taken on CPA, we've taken on a floodplain. And as a result of the floodplain, we're saving the people of the town of Sandwich 15 to 20% on their flood insurance. I've taken on the historic district. So, we're working with that board. So, I mean, and I've gotten those roles. I've expanded the role of the director of planning and economic development just because I saw opportunities to make it happen, opportunities to reach out to the public and talk and how can we be more effective? How do I gain the knowledge, skills, and abilities to make things happen? And 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 I've been pretty effective in that role. You know, um, I just want to point out our affordable housing ratio, the SHI, we're all supposed to be at 10%. We were at 3.4%, and we've been around that 3.2, 3.4% for a very long time, the town of Sandwich. But because of the work I've been doing and changing zoning bylaws and just getting right size development for affordable housing, we're up to 5.8. So that's a, that's a pretty big jump. So I've been trying to be effective. A lot of things just weren't done just because of turnover. Turnover of planners. So just having that consistency, we were able to increase our affordable housing. Having that consistency, we were able to market and sell buildings, surplus buildings which have not been sold before. They've tried RFPs in the past and they said, oh, this thing will never sell. It's a dog and blah, blah, blah. I said, no, we just have to emphasize what's good about it. Why do people want to purchase it? So, we've made those sales. The local comprehensive plan, the last one was 2009. That was like, 15 years, just got that done, just got that passed in town meeting in May, and it's going for certification to the Cape Cod Commission. Just we are, just get things done, and that's, I go in and I do my best, to get things done. And just again, if I could continue to emphasize, um, you know, I was a business development officer for the Cape Cod Cooperative Bank. I brought in 5% of their revenue. I mean, just one individual I brought, they were a $750 million bank. I brought in 5%. And how did I do that? I looked for opportunities, and one of the opportunities I saw, because I was a selectman, how do you think out of the box? So there was opportunities in creating accounts. We didn't have a government section in the cooperative bank account, cooperative bank of Cape Cod. But I saw, the towns have to put their money in a safe place, So I helped create that government division in the Cooperative Bank of Cape Cod, let them see that there was worth and value to it. So, I take a look. I try to think a little differently, look for the opportunities and really collaborate with people who could, who could make it happen. I always reach out for help and I've been pretty successful throughout my career.
Great, thank you.
And that was my 2.5 minutes.
It sound like the closing statement, so thank you very much.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
thank you so
That it?
much. Right.
Oh.
Right. Timing, so thank you.
Okay. Well, I thank you. And I know I'm not on the mic, but I do.
It's an opportunity to stretch legs.
Good idea. We don't have too much time.
We're not based on that.
Ah.
Get stuff in there.
Yeah,
Can't tell.
You notice it sounded get a little bit stuffy?
I imagine it is. I was
You don't- you don't
imagining in
feel
my
it?
mind that it.
You don't feel it?
Well, it's hard to tell when you sit here for like, is it that energy drink I just drank? Or is it getting warmer?
You're the frog in the pond boiling the water.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, probably.
So are we
You let me know when
ready?
you're ready and I will go down and get the next game.
30 more seconds.
Wine or low pitch wine?
Doesn't sound as much like.
Just turn the speed up. That one looks like it's gonna fly off. So.
Here. Looks like someone signed on. Someone signed on playing their music tonight, huh?
Yeah, so when you call in on the telephone line, the analog telephone line, it doesn't, you're not muted because it's a key sequence, so it's difficult and
Yeah,
like,
it's like star or something.
and if people don't realize it, then they're like.
I'll have to remember for Wednesday's agenda to make both of you co-hosts for the meeting.
Good.
Because as you can see, I don't have any controls in front of me.
Yeah, they're in front of me. Kind of weird, it's still light out at 8.
Great. It's nice.
Yeah, it's refreshing.
Yeah.
Didn't start to get dark till about 11 o'clock at night.
Oh, wow.
That's about 2 a.m. Started to light again at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
Saying to me, "Yeah, we're there for 2 weeks." I said, "What's wrong with this kid?"
Yeah, there's no nighttime. Evening.
Evening.
Hello.
Welcome.
I'm Jeremy. Thanks, everybody.
And then, yes, please make sure you sit near a microphone. Thank you. Right, so I'm Elena Brugos. I am the recently elected chair of the select board. We are going to jump right into questions rather than asking you to give an introduction. Although if you could just say your whole name, you said you're Jeremy, but if you
Yeah,
say your
my name is Jeremy Stoll.
Great, thank you so much. So we're going to ask questions. Each of us have a question or a set of questions that we're going to ask you. We also invite you to ask questions along the way. So we are asking the same questions of all of our candidates. And we hope that you will cover a lot of your background throughout the questions. We are going to ask you to give a 2-minute closing. And then, so I'm going to start with a couple of questions. So the first is about background. So as you can imagine, many of us and our residents have done a Google search on your name. We've seen public interviews you did and read newspaper articles. Please discuss your perspective on what we've seen and in particular, the background of leaving positions.
Yeah, certainly. So thanks everyone for your time tonight. Yeah, so probably my most public position was Director of Budget and Administration and Capital Projects Administrator for the City of Attleboro. In that role, I got to do a lot of work I was a staff support member for the the Municipal Buildings Commission and the School Building Committee, which is on television, twice a month, sorry. And then twice a month, I also was usually at municipal council meetings presenting positions of the mayor. I was appointed by the mayor in a non-political position, but he's a politician with policy priorities. So it was on me much of the time to be the voice of the administration and speak in a kind of dispassionate way to a group of electeds on behalf of another elected when they didn't always see eye to eye. And then I, talked to the newspaper in kind of a factual way about tax rates, about budgets, about capital projects, that sort of thing. And then since I've been at the sheriff's office, not really in the public eye nearly as much. So I likely would still be at the city of Attleboro, if not for Mayor Haru running for sheriff in 2022, taking office in 2023 and asking me to join as CFO. So I've gotten that administration kind of kicked off and I think turning around an organization where we took over for a 25-year incumbent who Sheriff Haru defeated in a contentious election. So it wasn't, the smoothest handoff. And for me, it's kind of not where I saw my career going. I enjoy the municipal side of things, being entrenched in a community, understanding issues with folks. So it's not important to me to be on television or in the newspaper. I would, be in a elected position or something else if that was my goal or if that was my aim. But I think what you'll find in my public persona is, like I said, really dispassionate and really policy wonk stuff on on municipal finance.
Great, thank you. And then our first sort of general question category is about residents. So how would you engage with residents to understand their needs, and what strategies would you implement to maintain and improve the quality of life while preserving the town's unique character?
So the quality of life and town's unique character is something that resonated with me when I saw this posting initially. I live in Millis, so just a few towns over. My wife and I bought our house there in 2021. It shares a lot of the same characteristics as Mendon. We're a little bit bigger at 8,000 people rather than the 62 or 6,300 or whatever it is here. But it's a rural community without much commercial tax base. It's large civic engagement among population. It's a place that's proud of their schools. It's a place that's proud of their, community farms and their community organizations. And it's a place that tried to get a senior center and lost an election for it. I think in terms of knowing folks that take individuals and stakeholders and who has the pulse of the community, those individual things take some time. But I think knowing the types of folks and what's important here is, evident in my town as well, where I serve on 2 public boards appointed by the select board there as well. So how would I go about that? I think listening tours probably too grand of a term for it, but I think the first couple of months in this position would be about the specifics. I think I know the generalities pretty well about municipal administration, and how that applies specifically to Mendon would be one of my principal aims over the first couple months. So things like, office hours, things like engaging with public boards that aren't, necessarily or traditionally supported directly by a town administrator, community events, recreation, park events, that sort of thing. So getting my face in the community and knowing the folks who are engaged and working to make it better already.
Thank you. Oh, and actually, yes. So why don't, if you could each introduce yourselves as you ask your questions, since we didn't introduce ourselves at the start.
Hello, my name is Brendan Chanel. I am the recently elected vice chair. My question pertains to budgeting and finance, so your wonk stuff. So what unique budget challenges does Mendon have, and how would you approach addressing them? And how will you engage and collaborate with the school district?
So unique challenges. I'm pedantic about the word unique in that, it's maybe be uncommon, but I think issues facing Mendon are issues facing small communities all over the middle of the state. And that's actually something I really like about the world of public administration writ large, is that, if Upton does something well, or Hopedale or Milford, even if they do something well, that's not a detraction from us, right? I can call my peers there and say, how did you write your RFP for, towing services or something? How'd you get so many responses for X, Y, and Z? I have found my peers in similar roles in different communities to be extremely helpful in my 5+ years in Massachusetts. So in terms of what the issues are with Mendon, small tax base, you're not a split tax rate community, right? You just have the senior exemption, right? So you're a single tax rate community. So none of it can be shifted onto business owners appreciably. We had that luxury in Attleboro where, folks who don't vote for the folks who set the tax rate, we got the burden shifted towards them, and don't live in town is what I mean. So I think the state is facing some fiscal challenges right now as well. I know Chapter 70 kind of gets right to the school districts, but even in, so I was at a talk from the Secretary of A&F a couple weeks ago, and they talked about, their revenue, their consensus revenue estimates, and how that's built on the state level, and the huge gains in stabilization the last couple of years have come largely from capital gains tax, which is a finicky revenue source from their perspective, from everybody's perspective. And right now, March was the first month where revenue estimates came above benchmark for the state, which led a lot of people to talk about, 9C stuff for 2025, or what, UGGA is going to look like for 2025. And the secretary was pretty adamant that their economic team thinks of this downturn as a blip that you can use stabilization to stabilize your way through, and that we're not in an economic recession place. So that's the less than unique answer, in that Mendon's going to benefit from state economic, good times, and going to hurt on state economic bad times. I think what insulates a community like this, as opposed to a community like Brookline, where I started in Massachusetts, is not as dependent on economically sensitive revenues. So when I left Brookline in 2020, I gave my notice in February and actually left in April. So COVID hit in the middle of me leaving, and the town's budget had to be drastically altered, as imagined here. But things like parking meter receipts, hotel receipts, meals, excise taxes, the town of Brookline had to cut tens of millions of dollars in all of that. And that's a big number, but it's also a big percentage of an overall budget. Whereas here, property taxes are a pretty stable source of revenue. But then residents get pinched in an affordability crunch. So I think it's incumbent. I think the detail in your town report and what gets communicated to the public on how these dollars are spent is really important when you're asking them to pony up, 2.5% plus an exclusion every year. So how I would deal with the school department, I think I really benefited in my time in Attleboro working with the school business administrator, Mark Furtado there, in that I previously came from the world of schools. So I was a budget analyst and the payroll manager for the public schools Brookline. And I took over as budget director from an individual who was an excellent municipal finance professional and went on to a assistant town administrator role, but often butted heads of the school department. And that's not me talking out of school. It was on television plenty of times, right? And I think my ability to empathize with the school department and their issues, right? School business administrators, you have budget, HR, transportation, school facilities, school lunch. Like there's a huge purchasing, payroll, grants, all of that. It's a huge mandate, and the fact that I could, speak their language, talk about student activity counts with some clarity, I think just helped the relationship to begin with. We also built them a $259 million high school, so like that probably helped the relationship a little bit, but that was, not me driving that. And then also at that time, my wife has since changed careers, stayed in education, but changed careers, but she was a elementary educator for 7 years. So I say this a lot, that Massachusetts doesn't have a great deal of natural resources to mine and things like that. What we can market and make people want to be here is our education systems. And I think that's why people stomach higher than otherwise, tax rates higher than they otherwise would be, because you get excellent school systems out of it. And I think that's, people aren't singular in why they choose to live somewhere, but for us, where we chose to live, that was a big driver for us, and I know it is for a lot of my peers. So that's kind of a soft skills answer, but I've had success bridging that municipal school divide.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mike Goddard. I'm not chair or vice chair. I'm just a sitting member. We talked a little bit about communication. So I'm just curious if you talk to us a little bit about your communication style, preferred mediums, and when you think about the role of town administrator, who do you see your primary constituents to be?
So for a long time, I lived my life in 2-page memos. Is how I would talk about it. I would have, so the mayor's communication in Attleboro would be anywhere between, 15 and 45 items, depending on time of year and, appointing, reappointing people, whatever. But I would regularly have 3, 4, 5 items which pertain to me or something in my orbit. Trying to communicate that to a group of people who are going to touch my piece of information once, who have concerns other than mine, who have full-time jobs outside of being a legislator or a municipal council member. I need to kind of get to the point. And so I think I got really effective at these, what I called my 2-page memos. It was often a page and a half or something like that. But it made the follow-up discussion when I got to municipal council and it was 9:30 at night and they didn't want to talk about, radars and speed humps or whatever. They already had the information and we could really quickly say, these were the funds coming from, this is the impact, here's the 3 quotes we got for whatever the things were. So I think that's the basis, right? We have to have everyone working from the same set of facts. So my primary communication skill or primary communication style and skill, which I think is most developed, is probably my written communication. Hope it comes across that I'm comfortable talking in front of a group as well. And then primary constituents, that's interesting, right? Because it's the town administrator is a piece of the select board, right? Is appointed by the select board to implement the policy of the select board on behalf of the residents of the town. So I think constituents, I think my constituents are the residents, and I think my supervisors, are you all. And whereas your both constituents and supervisors are the residents of Mendon as well. So it's a position I'm comfortable in that, right now I work for the sheriff. I work for the mayor. They're both elected folks. I've never worked for the legislative council or town meeting or anything like that. But I've dealt with and had success with in school committees, not regionals, but town school committees pretty well over the last couple of years.
Thank you.
I'm Jason Cooter, like Mike, regular guy. Just following on with the communication skills, interpersonal skills. Can you tell us about your personality and how you see that working with the staff here in Mendon? And that sort of will lead into what is your management and leadership style, and your philosophy and approach to management, both management traditionally and evaluation of that traditional management. So sort of who are you and what do you like to do?
Yeah. I'll try to answer them kind of both together. I say my management style is I'm not a micromanager by any means. And I think my default approach is to treat people like adults and professionals and assume that they're doing their job and know how to do their job until kind of it becomes evident they don't. I am cognizant of the fact that in this position and my last or most any new position you take on, you're stepping into an ecosystem that existed prior to anybody knowing what my name was. So I imagine month 13, there's going to be policies, procedure, well, maybe not policies, there'll be procedures that will look different from start to finish than they did on day one. But I generally trust professional municipal administrators and directors or whatever the title is, and to have the best interests of the community in mind. And that I have yet to meet somebody in the 3 organizations I've worked for in Massachusetts that weren't committed to public service in a kind of core way. It's really important to me, right? I have a master's in public administration, and before I came to the public sector, I was working in municipal bonds for 2 different firms. I did Hurricane Sandy recovery for the New York City Housing Authority in a consulting role. So my whole career has kind of been this public service bent. I'm not coming here from Deloitte or something like that. That was poor choice words. I interned at Deloitte and but in their tax group where we did tax credits and incentives. So it was public policy. So I think kind of who I am as a person, I get in the weeds myself. I have the first couple of years of my career, it was entirely, I know you don't use Munis, you use a different ERP, but my career was, or my job was half in Munis and half in Excel. And I got really comfortable with, sitting in my office and doing that and doing my charts that got put into someone else's presentation. And then Attleboro was a little bit more of, I had people to manage and I had to do some of that a little bit. And now my department's 50 people or something. I'm not the person who's tinkering around and, formatting and all that. So I've developed the ability to, I think, get people pulling on the same org, moving in the same direction. Specifically in the sheriff's office as it relates to purchasing, we've done some really big overhauls on our purchasing apparatus, which is in my department. So I'm generally laid back. I don't get really fired up in the workplace. I played golf this weekend. It was a little bit different, but I think I'm able to keep perspective. I know that, and that kind of comes back a little bit to, trusting public servants to, have the public good in mind to begin with. So I'm also not going to be the person who answers your emails at 2 o'clock in the morning. That's I had a previous boss who would send me, he'd wake up at 4 o'clock and send me something. And he goes, well, you don't feel like you need to respond. It's like, I'm absolutely not going to do that. So that to be on the record now, that if one of you emails me at 2 in the morning, I'm likely not emailing you back until 8 or 7 or whenever I pick up my phone in the morning. But so for me, that balance is important, and I think that kind of translates to my staff pretty easily.
Do you just want to dig a little bit into some more detail when you are managing people? What's your philosophy on the review and
right? So I have 5 direct reports, and when I started, I set up well, I met with all of them and all of their staffs, but once we kind of got into a cadence, I set up bi-weekly meetings with all of them. And it became quickly apparent to me that two of them, my finance director and the director of support services, which is maintenance, fleet, janitorial, all that kind of stuff. I met, rather than bi-weekly, I was meeting with them in their office or in my office 2 or 3 times a day, pretty regularly. So this standing scheduled meeting that I was trying to establish structure and check-ins and agendas and stuff like that didn't work for us because there was, it seemed silly to come and sit down for a structured 30-minute thing when I already spent 2 hours with you today. For folks like that, it's maybe deceptively simple, but I have 2 small whiteboards. Here's the finance projects. Here's the support services projects. Where are we at with these? In Attleboro, it was a little more structured in that I had capital project codes, capital project funds. I had, who's the architect, who's the OPM, who's the, CM or GC or whatever the type of project was, where are we at? And, I'm waiting on invoice 2 or, out to bid, something like that. And I had a big whiteboard that could track everything. It's not quite that detailed where I'm at now, but with those folks, the rigidity of consistent didn't make sense. With the other folks, payroll, grants, purchasing, there's not a fire every day that I need to take on. So those standing meetings stay for us, and I keep an agenda in a folder and say, here's what we talked about last time. What else did you say? They'll email me stuff ahead of time. Let's add this to the agenda, make sure we talk about blah, blah, blah. And then we do, formal year-end reviews. We have a form we're a state agency, so we have a form that comes from the state. What I appreciated was that the top rank was acceptable. So there's not like, grade inflation, so to speak. Not everyone's getting, exceeds expectations, 5 stars and everything. We hired you to do the job and keep the job, and thank you very much. So those, I imagine that's, I conducted them the way most people would conduct them. I write it myself, sit down, have a discussion with the person. They sign it, it goes in their file. And then 6-month mark. So, right after we close our fiscal year, I'm coming back to them and saying, here's what we talked about last time. Here's where areas for improvements. Here's stuff you said you wanted to do better. Where are we with that? So some of it's really evident with some folks who had stuff to work on, right? I told a staff member about their, customer service approach needed to improve. And that staff member then kind of snapped back at me when I said that in their year-end review. I was like, okay, this is demonstrating my point here. So on those sorts of things, it's more regular touch points, and it's positive feedback, right? This person sent something awesome, did really evidently and appreciably better on that. So for me, it was important to just send a quick note, thanks for taking the time to explain it. Thanks for how you worded this or something like that. I feel like not everybody needs that sort of encouragement, but and it's not necessarily my default way of interacting with folks. But I think, to steal the education term, I think the differentiation for staff was important.
Great, thank you.
Welcome, Jeremy. Thanks for throwing your hat in the ring and going through this. I'm Mike Morali. I'm the 5th member of this board. I'm the immediate past chair and actually grew up here in town. So I've lived here all my life, and I want to talk to you about economic development. And did you have a chance to look at the DLS study that was done here in town, or the master plan that we recently completed?
Yeah, we spoke about the master plan when I was here talking to the screening committee, and I didn't read the DLS, the whole study. I'm aware of existence. We talked about at least I talked about my desire to, keep those things fresh.
Mhm.
In that you put a 10-year plan or 5-year plan or whatever on the shelf. You can't then visit it 5 years later and say, how do we do, sort of thing. You need 10-year plan and then shift your window. But I don't know a lot of the specifics.
And that's not terribly important. I mean, just know that it exists.
Mhm.
My question is, you talked about the stability of, a town like this that has largely, residential real estate taxes. But of course, the bad side to that is it's very difficult to generate any more revenue, and we need to generate more revenue. So I guess my question is, how do you see us proceeding with that economic development? How would you help us, generate more revenue and, develop economically? What's your experience with that?
Yeah, my experience has been mostly, so when I was a school business analyst, the town gave us money and we said, thank you, right? I had no salary. In Attleboro, we had an economic development director, who was quite aggressive and quite good. My interaction with that was, how it interfaced with how development interfaced with other public services. So we had an approach where we didn't want to develop, didn't want to have large single family home developments, right? The payback period for a municipality on a single family home is decades in terms of strain on services and property taxes received. So our push was, lots of open space came available, and the city purchased it and made it open recreation conservation space. Highland Country Club in Attleboro closed, and the city purchased it and turned it into 100-acre park or whatever it is. So for me, I say that to say my involvement has been on large, dense, multifamily housing in transit-oriented development districts. So leveraging things like MBTA stations, which is not the approach. Yeah. So that's largely been my approach. That's largely been my experience. I'm sensitive to. I see it in my town. There's some 40B projects, when there's some small development, some mixed use development, which me, as the relatively new homeowner in town and a person who likes there to be things to do, appreciates that. And then there are folks who are rightly concerned about, we just built an elementary school. Do we have the capacity to take on 25 more units? Traffic's already terrible on 109. What are we going to do here? Our police already need one more person, that kind of stuff. So I get that it's a balance. It's not just, I say all that to say, it's not just more development is better. But my experience with kind of small town economic development, commercial development is not large.
Just this is a side of redirection. So you're part of the administration that came in and took over for Sheriff Hodgson.
Mm-hmm.
How did you handle that culture shift? To put
yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Sheriff Hodgson had been there 25 years. And is the chair of Donald Trump's Massachusetts campaign. And my boss is a Democrat who has consecutively beat three sitting Republicans for the office that he holds now and is prior to. So yeah, it was a culture shock. Senior staff just left immediately, right? General counsel, CFO, chief of staff, they all just left. So it was important for the sheriff to bring people he knew and trusted to start the administration, which is why I came on as CFO, and the Attleboro personnel director came on as chief of staff. So immediately we had our little triumvirate that said, let's learn this thing, right? None of us, the sheriff had been on the Hill, but he had never run a state agency, and I'm on municipal side and the chief of staff's municipal side. So for us, the technical learning curve was big. But the cultural one, took a lot longer. It became pretty apparent that a vast majority on the administration side of people were what I talked about before, were folks who wanted, to come in and do their job and serve the citizens of the county. So I'd say, of the folks who stayed, 75–80% of them, it was either they could exhale and feel okay, feel better, come to work, or they voted for the other guy anyway, but they're still going to come in and do their job. One big thing that I've super appreciated is our focus on the facility. So sheriffs in Massachusetts have two mandates. They have civil process, so serving court orders, judgments, and corrections. So we run the Dartmouth House of Correction Jail and House of Correction, the Dartmouth Women's Center, and the Ash Street Regional Jail, or Ash Street Jail and Regional Lockup. It is the prerogative of electeds to do kind of whatever they want. So we also had, before we got there, we also had a Homeland Security team. We had a comfort dog team. We had a Project Lifesaver. We had all these things that we had a regional task force. We had all these things that were in the community and excellent PR, and not what our appropriation was given to us for. So we've had me being in most of the conversations, and sometimes one-on-one with individuals, difficult conversations about what was the legislature's intention with this finite resource, which, you know, we never have enough of, and is it to, you know, trying to walk a line here, but is it to be more outward facing and PR development and that kind of thing, or is it to be inward facing? So we created a whole new vertical, Chief of Inmate Services, where we have reentry counselors, we have coordinators for housing, healthcare, and a job, and so all those resources that were focused on legal but non-corrections things have now been brought back in. So even the folks who were probably wishy-washy about a new administration and about, like, who's this guy from the northern part of the county who's never worked in, he worked at the DOC for 2 years. I think they've come to appreciate how, you know, head first we jumped into investing in the facility and focusing on our core mission. And then there are folks who lost their job because we cut their program, and they're probably, you know, on the other side of things. And
So how did you affect that change, and how did you maintain the staff? What are some of the day-to-day things that you did within your staff?
Sure.
It's a huge paradigm shift, right?
Yeah. I met with everybody day one, came in, but then kind of broke off into those smaller groups where I have grants and purchasing. Grants and education was combined into one person. And I came to the sheriff and I said, if we're going to focus on inmate program improvements, if we're going to focus on new things that we haven't done before, we're going to need to find a revenue source for this. And we're going to need a fully fledged grants office. And my grants office can't also be the person who's proctoring high set, GED things on the weekends and scheduling teachers for the whatever. So for me, it was important to have clearly delineated responsibilities. And so we fractured education off, put it over in the new Chief of Inmate Services. And we added a person to our grants team. And I was able to, we've gone out and got grants for body cameras, grants for CDL training, grants for all sorts of things. That
Where did you find the grants?
we have a pretty active state agent or state advocacy, whatever group, called the Massachusetts Sheriff's Association, who they have, liaisons. They have legislative liaisons who put out monthly, quarterly, whatever grant documents, sorts of things. My grants director has also been with the department for 30 odd years and has had a familiarity with the group.
So you could use it for that. How about when you were in Attleboro? How did you find revenue sources outside of the city when you're in Attleboro? Was that grants as well? And where was that from?
Yeah, so we didn't have a huge amount of grants. We had CDBG stuff. We had CDBG, Community Development Block Grant. So it's formulaic. The rules are quite strict on how you can use it and how you can slice it. But it's at least what we participated in, a formula grant. And then things like the CVRF, the first tranche of COVID money, and ARPA, the second tranche of COVID money, which was also formulaic. For us, it was, so in terms of raising revenue, small town stuff, right? I'm the budget director, but I'm also in charge of parking. So after I, got my head above water doing the budget in like 6 weeks at the start of COVID, took to reviewing every piece in the ordinances that had to do with revenue, whether it was mine or otherwise, and put together, I finally got to hire an assistant like a year after I started. So asked her to put together and then took and did my work with a list of every every fee that was in our ordinances and the last time that the fee was changed, what the fee was, what it was, garage, $50 changed in 2007 or whatever. And went through that and looked at everything that hadn't been touched in 5 years.
So you went through the fee structure within the
Yep.
community,
And I said,
updated.
the purchasing power of $35 when this was set in 2007 is not the same as the purchasing power as $35 in
Can
2023.
you just throw a percentage about how much things changed?
The parking, so I'll answer that two different ways. The parking fees themselves went up probably 40%. Because they hadn't been touched in so long. And it was, so at those as a percentage were quite high. As a percentage of how many of the fees did we then increase? Probably less than 10%. A lot of it because,
So a small percentage significantly to bring them up to date.
right. But you have to review them and look at them to know that,
Sure.
it does become blood from a stone a little bit. And it's one of those things too, similarly to a master plan or like right now I'm dealing with it with a collective bargaining agreements that, the original contract was 10 years ago. Then they just did MOA and never integrated it into the contract. And doing it once, right? If you have a 4-point MOA and integrate it into the contract, it's easy. But if you have an MOA that modifies an MOA that modifies a section, and then another MOA that deletes that section, it takes a while to do it, right? So the same thing with the fees. If you just have a constant kind of refresh and being cognizant of them, it doesn't become blood from the stone. It just becomes part of your job. But that's one of the difficult parts about local administration, right? The only thing that you can really lean on is your local receipts, and your vehicle excise tax is.
Unless you can find earmarks and grants in anything outside of the circle.
Yeah, the state earmark process is tough.
Tough,
And
but it can be done, but it's tough.
yeah, and everybody likes to, we got your project into the bond bill, but like we never borrowed on the bond
Yeah.
bill. So yeah, exactly. So yeah, if you can, bang on your state representatives. I don't have a ton of experience with that because, like I said, I've worked for electeds, and my boss used to work on the Hill, right? So he was the person who used to be a rep. Yeah. I think I have enough of an aptitude of in communications and understanding an issue to be like, again, here's my 2-pager on why we need $150,000 earmark for a feasibility study for a, well improvement or whatever.
You've done it.
Yeah. Without much success, but yeah, you have to ask. Yeah, exactly.
So we do have time for additional follow-up questions. So if other board members would like. I know a number of our questions had multiple parts, so if there was any part we want to return
I
to.
want to say Mike asked mine because I was curious about when you started and just stepped in and ousted a 25-year-old incumbent. What was that change management process like, and what were some of the things you needed to do?
Yeah, it's funny how entrenched in a community some things are. So even before I started, the sheriff pulled back a bunch of vehicles. There's probably a dozen people who had take-home vehicles. It's like, what the heck? If you're not responding to an emergency overnight, why do you have, an $80,000 police cruiser essentially? And then 6 months later, I went and got my watch battery changed in town somewhere, and I had a sweater on the head of sheriff's office thing on. And he goes, "Hey, how's the new guy? I heard, I called a bunch of the captains up there. I said, hey, you guys need a ride to work? Like, you don't have it," going on and on. And I thought it was really funny that somebody who I'd never met, or I don't know who this guy is. And it's not like we held a press conference and said, we're pulling the vehicles back. And for us, the wear and tear of people who live in New Bedford driving to Dartmouth on the, not appreciable. But it was the message about it. And it sent a message really quickly, kind of day one, that
New sheriff.
there's a new sheriff.
You were waiting to say that.
So much so that when he asked me to join, he goes, "Yeah, we'll give you a vehicle." And then he got there and looked at it and he goes, "No, you're not getting a vehicle." So I think he's a super genuine guy, which has a good head on his shoulders, and he's a good boss, which is why I drive 57 miles to get to my office. So I think from my change management perspective, I am a huge stickler on our procurement policies. I think that's the way any sort of, you know, public scandal is going to happen, right? The misappropriation and misuse of public funds. That's where it's going to start. So clamping down on every sort of way that we buy something was my big shock to folks. I'm not sure we were paying prevailing wage for the last couple of decades before we got there. So, some low hanging fruit. But for me, it was then, instituting, secondary signers on checks, putting a contract approval process together where the department head legal finance looked at it, signed off on it before it got to the sheriff to sign. Previously, people were handing stuff to the sheriff to sign. So implementing checks and balances, implementing adherence to the MSA procurement policy, cracking down on the number of people who had procurement cards, and just me and the sheriff.
So as you saw these opportunities to change more P policy and procedure, things like that, how did you introduce it to the people that had been doing it a certain way for the last X number of years? So how did you introduce? Because some people could take that as an affront.
Yeah,
Some
did.
So how did you introduce it? Because you don't want anyone to just step out. So what was that from a change management standpoint? How did you manage the change?
Yeah. So I'll talk a little bit about my approach, but first I'll say one way I screwed it up probably 2 weeks ago. We have this thing called comp time, flex time, right? You work overtime, extra time, but your contract doesn't have a provision for overtime payments, or if it's just like, an hour at an extra event. So we let you worked an extra hour here, you come in an hour late or leave an hour early within the next 60 days. Rampant what looked like abuse in this process, where people were staying an extra 15 minutes to get an extra, 0.3 hours, and then adding it together, and then all of a sudden having 2 days off on the end of a long weekend because they stayed 15 minutes late. So I tried to solve this process. Tried to solve this problem, and I came up with a process with payroll, and I sent out all users email, said, per our policy, 1, 2, 3, 4, per collective bargaining agreements, 2, 2, 2. You need pre-approval to do this. You need your supervisor to sign off before you work these extra hours. And then payroll got an inbox like this of paper the next day. And they're like, this doesn't work for me. So what I had done previously, and which I should have done here, and I'm trying to walk it back a little bit, is there's a policy and a resultant procedure that applies to the entire office. Not everybody uses it. Not everybody's a problem with it. So like specifically on purchasing, about how we did quotes and advertising, rather than send out a big email to all 600 and some users that include, 325 correctional officers who never buy anything on behalf of the department. I went to the 3 or 4 individuals who were having the most trouble with this and talked about their, I say, here as an organization, here's what we do, and talked about all these things that were almost exclusively specific to them, but couched it in a way that, as the new administration, we're going to make sure that here as an organization, here's how we do things now. And rather than try to, turn the aircraft carrier around at once, shift a degree, shift a couple of degrees, by talking with the people, right? My HR office spends $600 a year on supplies, $6,000 a year, whatever it is. My maintenance office spends $250,000 a year in supplies. So my thing about once we get to a $10,000 threshold on widget A and widget B doesn't apply to the HR person, right? So I'm not going to get her all worked up about, because people are sensitive about money too. So I didn't want to get her all worked up about, I think I'm doing something wrong here, when really it's I'm focused on 20% of the groups. That's 80% of our spending. Yeah, rather than try to make a one size fits all, back into it a little bit, back into the overall solution by specifically targeting a few channels.
Yeah. Oh, okay. All right. All right. So I guess, do you have any questions for us?
So I heard a few sighs when I talked about collective bargaining agreements. So I guess most. Oh, is that what it was? Okay, so do you not have integrated contracts? Is that something that's been an issue? I guess that's not totally. It doesn't matter what the answer is, right? Yes or no. It doesn't really matter. But I guess what I am curious about the relationship between this elected body and elected bodies like the regional school committee, because I don't have any experience with that, and I imagine there is a tension, even if you like them personally, and more if you don't. But I'm just kind of curious how you see your role working either with them or alongside them, if at all, or if it's just kind of two folks in the same community.
Address that.
I think it's been a long history. I think currently, we have a very good working relationship with them. Some of us sit on their subcommittees. So their budget subcommittee I sat on, their capital planning subcommittee I sit on. I think Elena basically attends almost every school committee meeting, so they get engagement from our perspective is important. So that you had the back and forth, knowing that a partnership and a collaboration is far more effective.
Yeah, totally.
Going forward. I don't think it's always been that way, but I think it's on very positive footing now, because I think the 5-member board you see here allows us actually to engage not only with the school, but with every other committee we have far more effectively. So we've got coverage across all the town committees and boards to demonstrate support and also answer questions as needed, or, they have asks of us, we take it back here, we talk about it, but specifically with the school, I think we've made some inroads. I think we continue to work with them closely. We're in the middle of collective bargaining, both on their side and our side, so I was involved in that as well. So I say generally positive.
What's does this board or the community have a path forward for a senior center? What the next steps would be for that?
I think we're
In
regrouping.
progress. Yeah, it's in progress. Yeah, so, right, because the vote was very recent, so we passed at town meeting, but we failed at the ballot. So, right, we are, right, regrouping, going to consider several options. Yeah, so we might have more of an answer to that next week.
Millith lost at town meeting for their COA, and then when I was in Attleboro, we actually used the same consultants they used in Millis. And I think the problem in Millis was it wasn't kind of right sized, right? There wasn't, it was a $16 million building or whatever, and folks. So when we were in Attleboro with the same consultants, it's like lessons learned, right? Here's the 4 corners of what the entire project can cost. Don't go out and design what you think is the best building, or don't go out and design that, answers every question everybody has. Here's your $14 million, and everything from the feasibility study to close out has to be within that $14 million. And that didn't work there either. So I was just curious what your path forward was.
Stay tuned.
Maybe anecdote. I think the key to it was going to be education feedback. Because we started with we have a committee that started with a plan, I think, and put out into the community. I think there's a lot of misinformation, like there always is. Of course, it's just the process. I think that's where we're at right now, is regrouping and just educating everybody on what we were trying to do, and get a lot more feedback about how people in the community are thinking about it.
Would you generally consider, a civically engaged community? Like, do you have, I know every community has, they're hyper engaged, but
I would say that what's largely changed, actually beginning really with COVID, is we started recording all the meetings and broadcasting meetings on Teams. So on Teams, all of the public meetings were all recorded and available on YouTube. And that really makes it easier for people, because they can engage in it, watch, based on their own schedule. I think that's helped immensely. I think people have, because we don't really have a newspaper. We have, but we don't have the type of news coverage we used to. So these Teams and YouTube, and it was a way for us to get the word out into the community. So I would say that's helped with civic engagement.
And I would say that the recent push for the senior center there's an opportunity for more engagement, because I think a lot of the community was not aware of the need or the process for other projects. And so we heard from other community members about other community needs and desires. And so now, those conversations have been started. So I'm hopeful that there will be increased engagement if we can maintain that.
And then if you can sew, voting blocks together, right? It's a senior center
Well, I think education is a big key. Like, for instance, I'd be curious to know what percentage of people who voted had actually ever walked in the senior center, which was built 30 years ago
Mhm.
of volunteers from the town, which was spectacular at the time. But it's wholly and totally inadequate for what we need now, never mind what we're gonna.
I think what's going to be key, you sort of touched on it, and to Elena's point, is that we need to articulate a vision that encompasses all the, we'll call them competing needs, although they're not really competing. It's just a question of synthesizing them. So recreational fields should not be necessarily at odds with the senior center. It just might be scheduled time differently so that we can manage our debt load, things like that. But if you want fields and you're hearing about fields, then you're saying, what about mine? So I think that's our challenge, is to kind of create that holistic vision and plan to say,
Right.
This is how, really the execution behind the master plan that we've talked about. It's all in there. They all want everybody's weighed in on what town needs. Now we need to kind of articulate an execution plan that allows people to see with them, right?
Yeah.
What's in it for me? Oh, I see. I'm 5 years out because we're planning.
I
Yeah.
have a few budget tropes that I come back to and say a lot, but what I would, the mayor would ask me, can we afford this? And I would say, almost without missing a beat, we can afford anything. We just can't afford everything, right? Like, we can do something you want to do, but I'm going to tell you the 10 things we're not going to do as a result. So it's all trade-offs with finite resources. So that makes sense.
Did you have any more questions?
No, I think a lot of the stuff that I kind of am interested in as a community would be me just asking a question to show you, like, that I read your annual report or something, or things where that, like, I'll show you I know what a tax recap is, but whatever the specific answer is not going to be important in either your decision or mine. So it's 9 o'clock on a Wednesday, so I'll leave those unsaid.
Then I guess I would invite you to give your 2-minute closing statement and tell us why you are the best fit for Mendon.
Yeah, so I've really enjoyed this conversation. Like I said, my career and my focus, my interest has been in the public sector. I serve on the Permanent Building Commission and the School Building Committee in Millis, and kind of being in a community and knowing its needs and learning about the stakeholders and its groups and all that kind of stuff is important to me just generally, but it's something that I have missed in the last year and a half in ways that I didn't quite anticipate I would. Everybody's preferred interaction with the county sheriff is to not interact with the county sheriff, right? It's the correctional facility. You just, like, how many times have you met Lou Evangelitis, right? So that then kind of becomes a little grating as a, what am I going into work every day for, right? To keep locks on doors and behind barbed wire. So for me, I know I haven't been there long, but I've been working for Paul for over 4 years now. So it kind of feels like the same job ported over. But for me, it's really been my goal to get on the local level. And I feel a community so close geographically to the one in which I live, and kind of economically and structurally, is I think I would be a good fit here, but that's your decision. But I think here would be a good fit for me in ways that I've determined and the reason I applied. And then it's great to see, I said I was impressed by this conversation, enjoyed this conversation, but an engaged board who kind of knows the issues and things like that. So I think you have my resume, you have my cover letter. Says that most of it in there, but kind of who I am, and we have a We have an 8-month-old, so we're here for the long haul. We bought a house bigger than what we need because we were here for the school district and whatnot. So we're not going anywhere anytime soon. And I think we'd be a good fit both ways.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
for coming out.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
your time tonight.
Thank you. Oh, and I'll hear from you or Marion sometime shortly, I imagine.
Yes, yes.
Because I applied the first time too.
Thank
Have a
you.
great night.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Does anyone need to stretch legs before we?
Congratulations to the selection committee.
Right.
Yeah,
Absolutely. That was,
Yes.
that was very,
Good
very
job.
strong
We-
candidates.
We used every minute of
Yeah.
the interview
pretty
time.
amazing. Everybody went the whole hour.
So, yeah, that's impressive. I wouldn't mind stretching a break, to be honest.
Okay, so why don't we take a minute? I mean, I guess what I would love is for everybody to consider maybe their top 1 or 2 candidates and think about sort of like what you see as the strength, and maybe we can talk through, I think.
That sounds good.
Makes sense.
Be back in 2.
2
Hey,
minutes.
hey,
All right.
and just one thing too, if we get into sort of votes, I just want, for me, if we vote, I'm probably gonna vote against a candidate that's not my first choice if we get to the point of voting.
Right, so
And,
let's,
I think
right.
all 3 are excellent choices.
right,
But
right.
that's the only way I figured I can figure out how
Right,
to
I mean,
demonstrate
if-
first,
if-
second, third.
Right, so, right, I wonder, this feels like a job for ranked choice voting. So,
Yeah.
I mean, maybe we could consider something like that.
Yeah.
So, and see if we can come to consensus in that
When you
way.
stay inclusive. When you speak, stay inclusive, not exclusive. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm just saying, if somebody were to say, jump out there and nominate one of the candidates, and that candidate was not my first choice, I might vote against it just because I want my first choice to be
Right.
heard. That's all.
Right,
Yeah.
okay,
It's not a negative on the individual.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
right,
It's just.
right,
Right, okay, great.
all right,
2 minutes.
2 minutes.
2 minutes.
Stretch.
This one will understand.
No, I would like nothing better than that. They had one of the holes last time. They actually had somebody that had like a potato gun. So you could actually, like on the 4th hole or something, you could bomb a shot. with a Potato gun. And they had, well, it had, it pressed the air. Yeah. And it would put your golf ball in. Fire it, right? And I said, now, if they had somebody who wanted to volunteer, I could do that all day.
Right.
Buy that. I'm sure I'd be in trouble.
I don't think I've seen that at a tournament. though.
Right?
That was hilarious.
I mean, talk about it, brilliant,
Yeah.
And of course, and there's even, you could even actually take a mulligan. It made a lot of money.
Yeah. Yeah, they bring different things to the table.
Right? Yep. Talk about the. How it shifts. There,
Yeah. I'm not as familiar, but you seem to have some.
well. Press conference. Sure, it's decades. Next people. I was just. But I'm just saying it was, I think a lot of people liked what we did. Yeah. After a while. It's almost. Administration. Look at that. Such a change. It's working. Right.
One more bite left. All right, so, does everyone, so, does everyone have like one or two people in mind that they want to discuss? I think maybe, why don't we, like, Brendan, do you have a
So
pick in the second?
I think it really depends on the vision for the town and how we want this to go. They all have such individual strengths. I think, there's a correct candidate for implementing like massive change, I think. There's a correct candidate for doing things in a more graded and slow manner. So, yeah, I just like to, I don't know, I almost want to talk about the role a little bit more before we
Sort of talking about what?
talk about the role and what we see in, the 5-year plan a little bit before I pick a particular candidate. I do have some in mind though.
Was there something in particular that you wanted to think about as with respect to the role?
Guess, are we emphasizing analytical skills or interpersonal skills? It's my big, that's the two sides of the coin.
Right.
Yeah, I was going down the path of, when you talk about 5 years, this is gonna be execution, change management. I mean, this is sort of, we've talked about some things that are,
Pretty much.
potentially wholesale changes in the way we may or may not be doing things. So that's sort of the thing that strikes me, as well as who complements, we've got a team in place, so how do we best complement or build our bench strength with this role, right?
Exactly.
And I've got somebody in mind too.
Okay.
All right, so, what do we have in play? Like, what is it? Do we have, we have, all these candidates said something very similar, which is like the balance, the yin and the yang, right? The balance. We have something, we need more of everything. We can only get one set of skills. So I'll start with the name dropping just to move this along. I feel like Ralph was the middle of those candidates. Like when I'm thinking, this last candidate really excels in my mind, right? Like because I'm with you, the last person, and he also brought forth the organizational change management is like number one for us. But Ralph is that balance on the interpersonal and the organizational, and the experience. The positive on him is his wide breadth of experience, not always focused municipally, but also maybe not all that we need all the time. This last candidate had that same awareness and knowledge, just not the applied skill. And so, and he was also very transparent about that, which was important to me. So,
Yes.
those are my two picks right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Those are mine too.
Is it in that order?
I had Jeremy 1, Ralph 2. Excited to go.
I think, okay.
And Ralph, I think, had a passion. I appreciated his passion. He's gonna get stuff done, is my sense, and the stick-to-itiveness that he
Right.
kept
Yeah,
emphasizing.
that was very
Ran
impressive.
with me, but I heard that with Jeremy, I see professional organizational skills that are gonna keep us on track. That's sort of where I was, and he's got sort of this dry sense of humor, so I think he started, I was like, wow, this is a really interesting interview, but then he just dropped a few. I'm like, wow, okay, he has a sense of humor to him.
Right,
that-
right. And
That's there,
yeah,
you know?
especially in the, I could ask you questions, but it would just be to show what I've read. So.
Yeah, conversing at the end, he was the only candidate who had didn't speak to us. He had actual conversation. And your flow back and forth was also very interesting. So
Yeah, yeah.
My thought, and I'm agreeing with everything you say, but I think it's important to begin with the end. Right. Things that Ralph talked about talked about our financial reserves, talked about our finances, talked about the need for revenue, and brought up what is your big project, talked about the commercial areas. I really think if we look at this master plan, where we want to go, and I think, the economics of the situation, fuel, I think that's the end. As much as I find Jeremy's engagement and I think his skills, are terrific. I'm not sure. I think what Ralph offers, I think we need it more. And that's why I agree with the top, I would be okay with either one of them. Those is my top two. But I think what we need, particularly when we talk about revenue, coming up with school and talks about, finding economic opportunities. I think that from that standpoint, I think, he edges it out. The only issue is, and I honestly don't know how he's gonna pull that rabbit out of the hat.
Well, that's sort of where I said, I made a note here, like, he actually had different economic development ideas than I've ever heard before. Generally, I hear the same things,
Yeah, I wrote
but
that down too.
I went back to it, I said, in a vacuum, that sounds good, but I said to myself, realistically, is that something that we can actually, because his examples are not, necessary, that do we have surplus, I mean, we actually do have some surplus land potentially. But he went back to his, the crown jewel is quite an achievement in terms of the adaptive reuse of a school. But, okay, if we had a school to adaptive reuse, I think we would be doing that too. So that's kind of back and forth.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I mean, if he could, in other words, if he could do it, I'm pretty familiar with what our resources. I'm not sure. I don't know how to connect the dots.
yeah. Are you saying he's overly optimistic or he's overly confident?
I'm not saying either. I'm saying that I just, I can't see my. Clearly, we need what he's I'm agreeing, we need what he says. I just don't. I don't know.
I think the thing is he's a marketing whiz, I think. Very positive. He's able to market things.
Right.
But part of me is saying we're making progress with our own planning department between Jack and Dylan in terms of getting pieces out there, we sold land at the bottom of the hill and we got something coming in there. So I liked his passion, and I really think the way he demonstrated, you need somebody who's going to be here for a length of time to see it through.
Yeah, that
And then I saw 8-month-old, I'm not going anywhere. So I kind of that balance, was like, oh, okay,
Right.
that's a,
Also,
Right, they both, right.
just,
so
I
20,
just think
20
about-
minutes away.
yeah, it would, his knowledge of state level, I don't know if it's laws or, he was rattling stuff off. He had a
Right, well,
knowledge base we
He
don't
has-
have.
He has the, I think the master's in
Policy.
policy. So like,
Right.
so I think there's, right. I mean,
But he's-
definitely policy wonk.
Yeah.
Right.
And the big difference between the two, you see one guy clearly has been in the commercial, the private sector. And even some of the ways he suggested about basically monetizing town assets, which is really what we talked about doing. And you have somebody else who actually, and which what I was trying to get at is he understands the government system.
Right.
And
Knows how to navigate.
yeah, and how to navigate. So I mean, in other words, I think, like I said, I'm okay with either one of them. I like the idea of Ralph's, vision of, look, we need to increase these reserves, we need to develop this revenue, we need to, and I just don't know, and he talks about preserving the town, and of course, if, sandwich. Obviously, he's done that because there's been some big transitions there. I just don't know how much that all translates over to Mendon. But clearly, the things that Jeremy did, in some of these other places, certainly I think it does translate.
Brendan, did you have your,
I'm on the honestly, I'm on the same page.
So-
I came in with the same two names.
right? And I also, those are the two names that I also had in mind, and I see different strengths for each of them.
Exactly.
Yeah. So. Yeah.
Honestly, if I could, if I thought about it now, I love to. Honestly, if I could get Ralph to give me some specifics about how you can accomplish, you talk about the revenues, how you're going to accomplish it.
Does his energy really match?
Well, in other words, is it, well, I think Mike, he's a marketing whiz, right? But if, where's the beef?
He's also a skilled lawyer and law enforcement.
Well, right, that's true too. I mean, I don't know, I
It's hard to deny all that experience. But it's also hard to deny the energy that Jeremy is bringing as well. It's different, but it's still solid.
I mean, the whole idea is I don't, we need what he's offering. The fact that I can't see how to get from here to there doesn't mean that he can't do it. It just,
That's correct.
Right.
That's correct.
he's got some, but the point
He
is.
believes it regardless.
He's got a great deal of private sector, banking, financial experience that would probably actually set us very well.
Jeremy's got working for the bond rating
Right,
agencies. I mean,
That's.
Yeah.
And the budget, he did
That translates.
And the school district.
And he's been in the school district.
and I thought actually the answer to your question, Mike, when you said, I went through all the permits and fees.
Oh, yes,
That, I said, okay,
right.
that made me sit up.
It was like,
Right.
like sitting in the dentist chair without Novocaine,
Yeah,
just hearing him say it.
Mhm.
We've been talking.
Right.
right. But I think it's, is it, okay.
And
That- So it's almost like that was a practical
Yeah.
execution to a problem.
And it meshes well with the approach that we've been taking, which has
Right.
been very data driven to like,
Yeah.
it's that, it strikes me as very data driven to actually go through and systematically.
And I just want to reiterate, this is a much different place today than I was in the first round.
Correct.
I see
Yes.
3 people that could do the job
Yeah, they want to.
and, I just,
I would say that, but when we started, if we pick our best and they don't. Still good.
well, we all agree on 2 names, just not necessarily the order, I guess. So we've got once we figure the order, we got our primary and our backup, right?
Right.
And 2 of us, I don't.
again.
So. Well, one thing, I thought you gave an order. I gave an order.
Something.
One thing that resonated with me about Jeremy was talked about, first thing I did, okay, we're implementing policies and procedures, we're documenting everything, we're getting the process down.
It's gonna run a tight ship.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think we've been trying to do that. It's difficult to do that from our side, you
Right.
know? That would be a really helpful thing, I think.
It struck me as more of a comment, like I said, okay, if I were stepping into it, I'd probably be doing something very similar, so it resonated with,
Yeah, same.
I do appreciate that he owned his mistakes because that shows the ability to learn from mistakes.
I mean, the real question is, will he grow into this position the way he seems to have grown into all the other ones? Right? Like, will he continue that growth?
I think there's a reason someone took him from one.
That also impressed me that, right, somebody starting a new job thought this would be.
as a CFO too. That's not a.
Right.
He was one of 3 people in the new position, right? That's,
Yeah, I mean,
His
so
boss liked him.
I had written down is willing to learn and be excited about an entirely new position. So.
Right, so, I mean, are we at the point where anyone would like to make a motion? I believe that Greg has some suggested wording for such a motion.
Yeah.
Not to say that we need to, but yeah, I be open to hearing that. I will say that as I was listening to them, I could imagine each of them in this role. So I think it was very positive
Yeah,
to hear this.
want to thank you, yes.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do appreciate all three of them for coming in and giving their time and their thoughts. And they all had, I mean, it would be nice if we could actually like extract some qualities from each of them to, build.
That technology isn't allowed.
What's that?
I said that technology isn't allowed.
Oh, okay, right. But I mean, they all, I think, bring excellent experiences to the table.
I move to make a conditional offer of employment as the Mendon Town Administrator to Jeremy Stahl, subject to a background check and entering into an employment agreement consistent with Mass General Law, Chapter 41, Section 108N.
Second.
Any further discussion? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Is that? I
Yeah.
think that's
5-0.
that.
We
All
got
right,
five.
so, right, the motion passes, so we will be making an offer to.
Why can't we use the second on
I was.
If we have
Here.
well, I guess we don't need to take a formal discussion on a Plan B, right? We just know what it is.
Right, so it sounds like I guess we will revisit this next week. Hopefully we will be revisiting it in an executive session to iron out contract details, but
So you're gonna reach out to him, tell him the news.
that's a good question because I wasn't part of the process last time. So,
What's that?
Did Mary reach out?
you did,
Yes, I believe I let Mary know. She told him that we basically, of course, the great thing is she could watch this if she's not watching it.
right,
And what she did was she. Right. And I think basically we just did this openly deliberated, the idea, so that all three of them know that we thought they were all good candidates. Didn't have an order. She'll.
so I guess one question is, when, to bring Karis in. So, since Mary did recommend that we, use Karis for the, contract negotiation, so, I might just check in with Karis and then,
Can I suggest you
yes.
circle back with Mary first?
So, oh, yes,
Take Mary's
absolutely,
Advice about where, at what point.
absolutely.
Because
All right,
maybe you can, in big broad strokes, begin with him.
Sure.
Jeremy. Once you get, like, for instance, you may not need Karis until the whole background check. Stuff, right?
potentially.
Yeah.
So one other question is, it would be, I know, actually Karis suggested that it would be useful to have two select board members discussing this. So I guess two possibilities. It's you, Mike, or you, Brendan. So Mike, because you've been continuing it, and Brendan, because you were vice chair. So I don't know if one or the other of you has more availability at this time, but I do think it would be useful to have another board member to.
The goal is to get this done for sure.
Yes,
So-
absolutely.
I can certainly, I mean,
That's fine with me. For continuity's sake, I think that makes
Okay,
sense.
so I will email Mary and I will CC you and we will together iron this out and
but
fingers
as I
crossed.
recall, what you should do is text Mary now. She's not watching.
Okay, I don't actually,
All right, I would text Mary
okay.
and tell her that we.
I may not have her
All right, you want-
cell
you
phone
want me
number.
to-
Sure, if you, could you text her, please? Suppose you could text me and do a
Yeah,
group
group
text.
Do we want to let Mary know to keep candidates warm while we're negotiating with our primary?
Yes, that's what I would do.
Yes, please, yeah, please do. I think.
Yeah.
We,
This,
I think we're at the point where we really want to come out with a.
Yeah.
Yes.
Higher.
Yeah, right.
And honestly, I don't understand any of these candidates.
Because I've already been texted. Not enough.
Okay, okay,
Kind of the
Thank you.
logistics of the.
okay.
Right, well, then I move to close tonight's meeting.
All right,
Second.
all right.
Thanks,
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, all right, meeting is adjourned
Thank you, everybody.
at.
Thank
what
you,
is it?
everyone, for joining.
9:40.